Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Romina Celeste Nunez. Romina Celeste Nunez was born in 1990 in Asunción, the capital of Paraguay. She is the oldest of two daughters. After her parents' divorce at a young age, her mother, Miriam Rodriguez, single-handedly raised the girls. Despite her ex-husband's lack of financial support and interest in their daughters, Miriam worked several jobs to support her family financially. When she was still a schoolgirl, Romina got a job in order to help her mother and younger sister. At 17, she began a dating relationship with a man named Christopher. He pursues her romantically and they make plans for the future together. When Romina discovered she was pregnant, she informed Christopher. Rather than being supportive, he gave her a difficult choice. She had to decide between ending the pregnancy or breaking up with him. Romina was deeply hurt by Christopher's words, but she sought the advice of her parents. After their discussion, she decided to keep the child. Her main concern was that if she had an abortion at such a young age, she might never be able to become a mother again. Romina felt she had no other choice. Her lover, Christopher, ended all contact with Romina, never showing any interest in her or their child's future. At 18 years old, Romina gave birth to a son named Lucas. However, the arrival of the baby made their already difficult financial situation even worse. Money was scarce, and Romina's mother had to support both her daughter and her grandson. Desperate to improve their situation, Romina moved to Spain, hoping to find better job opportunities. However, in Paraguay, she struggled to find a decent job with good pay. She then reached out to her maternal aunt, who lived in Spain, and the aunt invited Romina to join her. Romina's aunt reassured her that settling in Europe, particularly in Spain, would be easier and offered more opportunities. Romina made a quick decision and packed her essentials. She bought a plane ticket to Spain and set off, leaving her 2-year-old son with her mother and younger sister temporarily. She planned to reunite with her son once she found a new home and a stable job. In the late summer of 2010, Romina flew to Madrid and then traveled to the nearby town of Alcobendas, where her aunt took her in. Romina quickly started looking for work and was lucky. She landed a job as a hotel administrator, earning a decent salary. She sent some of the money back home and used the rest to rent her own apartment, not wanting to be a burden to her relatives. It wasn't long before Romina met a man named Javier, with whom she had a passionate romance. Javier was also an immigrant, having left El Salvador a few years prior in search of a better life. He worked in construction and seemed like a good partner. Romina's situation became complicated when she became pregnant. Despite this, she and Javier tried to make their relationship work. However, after the birth of their son, they eventually broke up. The breakup left Romina in a difficult position as a single parent in a foreign country with no clear direction. Romina's aunt provided temporary support by letting her stay with her. A few months later, when her son was around 6 months old, she went back to work due to financial necessity. However, her life took another turn for the worse. Initially, she ignored her poor health, attributing it to stress and exhaustion. Eventually, she visited a doctor and was diagnosed with cancer. She underwent multiple rounds of chemotherapy, which caused significant physical changes, including hair loss and weight loss. Despite these challenges, she bravely battled the disease and eventually overcame it. Following her treatment, Romina made a quick recovery and continued to work. She used wigs to hide her hair loss. Romina believed she had overcome the toughest challenges and was now due for a happy time. After saving money, she planned a trip to Spain with her eldest son, mother, and younger sister. During the summer of 2017, Romina attended an event with friends and met a man named Raul Diaz. Raul Diaz makes a strong impression with his attractive appearance, stable career, and solid financial situation. Smitten by Romina's beauty, he asked mutual friends about her and showed interest. Romina also found Raul appealing and agreed to go on a date with him. Raul, nearly 15 years older than Romina, worked as a lead process engineer at a major energy company. He had 2 failed marriages and 2 teenage daughters from previous relationships. Despite their age difference and complicated pasts, Romina felt no intimidation. As a single mother raising sons from 2 previous relationships, Romina felt a connection with Raul. After their first date, the couple knew they were meant to be and didn't want to be apart. Romina was overjoyed, and her excitement was contagious as she shared her feelings with her friends. Raul showered her with thoughtful gestures daily, including surprise gifts, romantic getaways, and heartfelt compliments. She truly believed she had found her soulmate, someone who would love and accept her and her sons unconditionally. However, Romina bliss was short-lived as disturbing rumors about Raul began to surface. She heard that he had been abusive and cruel to his previous spouses, which ultimately led to the breakdown of both his marriages. Despite her concerns, Romina initially chose to disregard these rumors. Despite the significant age gap between them, and each having children from previous relationships, they decided to continue their relationship. Just 6 months into their relationship, they decided to cohabitate and settled into a luxurious villa on the beautiful island of Lanzarote in the Canary Islands. To Romina, this place was like a real heaven, but her happiness was short-lived. Raul, the man she once thought was her ideal partner, gradually became an brute and controlling man in the family. The 3 of them, Romina, her youngest son, and Raul, struggled to live together in harmony. Raul attempted to present himself as a husband and good father. And Romina even thought he would be the ideal father for her children. He promised her a long and happy life together, where he would fully support her and the children, leaving them wanting for nothing. Believing Raul's words, Romina agreed to marry him when he proposed. However, Raul wanted them to have some private time after the wedding, to they enjoy their time together. In fact, Raul wanted to take Romina's oldest child out of Paraguay and also wanted to get rid of her youngest son. Romina trusted Raul, despite her friends' concerns about his unusual behavior. In June 2018, her fiancé, Raul, bought tickets for Romina and her child to travel to Paraguay, but purchased a return ticket only for the Romina. When Romina returned home, she told her mother and younger sister about Raul, but they were skeptical of his intentions, suspecting he might be trying to get rid of her child. This led to a disagreement between Romina and her loved ones. A few days later, Romina returned to Spain, she promising to return in the fall. Upon Romina's return, she was warmly welcomed and experienced 2 months of happiness with Raul. However, in August, just a few days before their wedding, he brutally attacked her. This incident shocked Romina, but Raul begged for forgiveness on his knees, promising it wouldn't happen again. Believing him, Romina didn't report the incident to the police and kept it a secret. On August 10th, she held a wedding with Raul, covering up her bruises and marrying the man who would later take her life. 2 weeks after her wedding, Romina traveled back to Paraguay for a brief visit with her family, rather than to pick up her sons as she had originally intended. Romina's mother and younger sister were shocked by the changes they saw in her. Romina seemed upset and lost, had a noticeable limp, and bruises on her neck, which she tried to conceal with a scarf. When asked about her condition, Romina would remain silent or claim the injuries were caused by an accident. Romina told her family that her husband suggested the visit, as she had not seen her children in a while and missed them dearly. Her mother, Miriam, even praised her son-in-law for his kindness. However, Miriam still sensed something was wrong and was concerned about her daughter's unhappiness. Romina spent almost a month at home, which surprised her family, especially since she had just gotten married. Eventually, in mid-September, she secretly borrowed money from relatives for a return ticket to Spain. This was because her husband refused to pay for her trip back. This should have been a warning, but Romina still held on to the hope that her marriage would ultimately be happy. Romina's mother, younger sister, and 2 sons last saw her at the airport on September 17th. After returning to her husband, Romina's life gradually turned into a nightmare. It was eventually revealed that her husband, Raul, was addicted to drugs and no longer hid his addiction from her. While under the influence, he became violent and tortured her. Although Raul repeatedly abused Romina, whenever she tried to leave him, he would make promises to change and vow that the abuse would not happen again. After each incident, there will be a brief period of peace, during which Raul will show affection, where Raul would show affection, give gifts, and plan romantic dates. However, over time, these lulls became shorter, and the episodes of violence occurred more often. Just before the new year, Romina confided in her best friend about her fear of Raul, believing he might one day kill her. On December 29th, Raul severely beat Romina, forcing her to seek medical attention. Hospital staff suspected something was wrong and wanted to report the matter to the police. However, Raul intervened, claiming Romina had injured herself and denying any wrongdoing. Romina then refused hospitalization, choosing to go home instead. On January 1st, 2019, Miriam, Romina's mother, attempted to reach her daughter by phone multiple times, but Romina didn't answer. Concerned, Miriam then called her daughter's spouse, Raul, but he didn't answer either. After several days of not hearing from her daughter, Miriam sent a message to Raul stating that she was going to report this to the police if she didn't get any feedback. Raul immediately responded by calling Miriam back and explaining that he and Romina had an argument on December 31st. Following the argument, Romina packed her belongings and left him. Raul assured Miriam that Romina was just upset and would return once she cooled down, as she had done before, in similar situations. However, Miriam was not convinced by Raul's explanation and suspected that something may have happened to her daughter. She insisted that Raul go to the police to report the situation. Raul did not report his wife's disappearance until January 8th, and only did so because her relatives pressured him to take action. However, his story was different this time. He claimed his wife had taken his money after they quarreled and might have traveled to Paraguay to visit their children. Raul's testimony was inconsistent and contradictory, fueling further questions and doubts. As a result, law enforcement took a closer look at Raul and the couple's life. After interviewing friends and relatives, they uncovered signs of a troubled marriage. Romina had confided in loved ones about Raul's abusive behavior. Others had noticed bruises and injuries on her body, leading them to suspect that something more serious was going on. Raul was placed under secret surveillance, and his phone calls were tapped. Despite this, he seemed to know that he was being watched and was extremely cautious for a long time. The investigation continued, and investigators soon discovered a crucial piece of information. On December 29th, Romina was taken to the hospital with severe signs of beatings, but her husband forbade her from reporting the incident to the police. This incident did not happen just once, as Romina had reported domestic violence a few months ago, but she withdrew the report the next day. Raul eventually let his guard down during a phone conversation with a police officer who was a relative. In this conversation, he claimed that his wife was no longer alive and that her body would never be found. This is an important lead in the case, and Raul was arrested as the main suspect. He was then taken in for an interrogation. During questioning, Raul claiming that on New Year's Eve, Romina had become intoxicated and demanded that he move her children into their home immediately. When he refused, Romina became aggressive, throwing objects at him and starting a fight. Raul claimed that he left the house to calm down, but returned a couple of hours, later to find Romina unresponsive in the bathtub. Raul claimed Romina died from suffocation due to being heavily intoxicated, but he was afraid of being suspected of being her killer. As a result, Raul attempted to conceal the evidence and decided to remove all traces and then report her disappearance. However, everyone was amazed at the way he handled the body. Raul claimed that he burned Romina's body in a barbecue area located in a private courtyard of their upscale residential complex. He believed the private location would prevent neighbors from seeing or smelling the burning body. Unfortunately for Raul, a barbecue is not an efficient tool for burning a body, and the remains were still intact after a few hours. He then took out the remains, dismembered the body, packed them in bags, and rented a car a couple of days later. Raul drove to a remote, deserted area on the island and threw the dismembered body into the sea from a rocky point. Authorities searched the shoreline for weeks, scouring the areas where Raul claimed he had disposed of the remains. Divers were also involved in searching the ocean floor. Tragically, despite massive search efforts involving numerous volunteers, no body fragments were recovered. The case continued unfolding, with Raul eventually being formally charged with domestic violence and murder on January 16. Following a thorough search of Raul's home using specialized equipment and luminol, investigators discovered multiple traces of washed-up blood in various rooms. The investigation also revealed that Raul had bought caustic soda on the internet, a strong chemical often used to dissolve and remove organic substances and old paint. In a room on the second level, further evidence was uncovered. The man had attempted to clean a bloody stain on the floor, but in doing so, he damaged the flooring and decided to paint over the area. According to the investigation, this room is where Raul chopped his wife into pieces. Key evidence was discovered that suggested a violent struggle took place. A broken piece of Romina's fingernail with blood and a layer of skin from Raul were found on the floor, indicating she was still alive and resisting when the attack occurred. Additionally, in the bathroom, Romina's contact lens was discovered stuck to a tile on the wall, possibly dislodged from a forceful blow to her face. Despite their exhaustive search, investigators initially failed to find Romina the body. However, the police station received a call from a tourist who reported a suspicious object on the beach, a piece of lung tissue that could have belonged to either a human or an animal. In late February, forensic analysis confirmed that the lung tissue belonged to Romina. Throughout the investigation, Raul maintained his innocence, sticking to his claim that Romina had unintentionally drowned in the bathtub due to intoxication. Notwithstanding evidence of a violent struggle found in the house, Raul insisted he did not use any tools or objects to dismember her body. Raul's claim of trying to burn his wife's body completely on a barbecue was untrue. There were several reasons why this could not have happened. Firstly, it would have been impossible for him to place his wife Romina's body on the barbecue in his yard. Secondly, even if he had been able to, the prolonged exposure to the fire would not have made the bones fragile enough for them to fall apart on their own without any tools. Additionally, in order to separate the lung from the body, it would have been necessary to open the chest, which could not be done with bare hands. Despite the investigation's proof, it was never determined exactly how Raul killed his wife. However, evidence of a struggle was found in the house, suggesting that he may have beaten her to death. It was clear that Raul had dismembered her body in the same room where he later repainted the floor to cover up the bloodstains. Raul's trial was repeatedly delayed. During this time, he changed lawyers several times. Eventually, due to overwhelming evidence, Raul admitted to accidentally killing his wife during a fight, contradicting his previous claim that he had found her dead in the bathtub. It wasn't until June 2023 that he was finally found guilty. However, Romina's loved ones felt the sentence was too lenient. Raul received a sentence of 12.5 years for involuntary manslaughter, 2 years for domestic violence, 1 year for the physical harm inflicted on Romina in December 2018. which resulted in her hospitalization and several months for physical abuse. The combined punishment for all the offenses was almost 16 years in prison. Raul is currently serving his sentence, but at the same time, he is trying to have the court's decision overturned by filing appeals. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Tina Watson. Tina Watson, 26, was hesitant to share her engagement news with her parents. This was her third attempt at marriage, after her previous relationships with Scott McCulloch and Stan Marks ended. She met Gabe Watson at a Christmas Eve party and they developed a relationship after both had gone through breakups. 2 years later, Gabe proposed to Tina, who agreed to marry him if her parents gave their blessing. To win them over, Gabe planned a romantic dinner on Valentine's Day, but rescheduled for February 15th when Tina's father was available. During the dinner, Gabe made a bold announcement that he planned to spend the rest of his life with Tina. Her father then asked the seemingly straightforward question, "Gabe, do you love Tina?" However, Gabe was caught off guard and stuttered, failing to provide a clear answer. Her father wrote off Gabe's awkwardness as mere nervousness in front of strangers. The father then turned to Tina and asked the same question, but she sidestepped it. Instead, she expressed her fear of being alone at the age of 26. After a moment of contemplation, her father gave the young couple his blessing. As the wedding preparations were underway, Gabe and Tina clearly had different ideas. While Tina was busy thinking about the wedding dress, the guest list, and the entire ceremony, Gabe was focused on planning their honeymoon. He did not consider Tina's preferences for their vacation, as he had already made up his mind. Gabe had decided that they would go to the Great Barrier Reef in Australia and go scuba diving, without consulting Tina about it. Gabe and Tina had planned to explore the sunken ship, the Townsville Titanic, which sank in 1911. However, Tina was not a skilled diver, unlike Gabe, who was an experienced scuba diver with over 50 dives under his belt. He was even completing a rescue diving course. Gabe had occasionally taken Tina scuba diving in a pool, but only in calm waters and under the supervision of lifeguards. Gabe made the decision to have Tina learn to scuba dive before the honeymoon or at home. He was serious about it, and Tina felt she had no choice but to comply. Gabe even went so far as to borrow money to buy Tina her own scuba gear and pay for lessons. However, Tina's first instructor was not impressed with her skills and warned Gabe that she was not fit for open ocean diving. Gabe angrily interrupted the dive instructor, accusing him of not explaining the lesson clearly. As a result, the second instructor promptly refunded Tina for the unfinished class, and on October 11th, Tina and Gabe were married and flew to Australia just 2 days later for a lavish honeymoon paid for with a $10,000 wedding gift. Gabe's honeymoon with Tina included spending time in Sydney, where they walked around the city, visited the aquarium, and the zoo. At first, Tina was excited, but as their trip to the Great Barrier Reef approached, she became increasingly saddened. On October 21st, they flew to Townsville and in the evening boarded a boat to the Great Barrier Reef, a dream destination for many divers. According to employees at the diving company, they didn't appear to be experienced divers. Even Gabe, who had completed diving courses and had some experience, seemed unsure of how to use the equipment, as if he had never seen it before. Despite this, Gabe assisted Tina in passing her pre-dive exam, a test that is usually administered individually. Additionally, when the instructor offered to help Tina underwater, she declined the offer. The dive log noted the presence of a strong current on that day, a crucial detail that should not be overlooked. Upon arrival, Gabe assisted his wife in organizing their equipment, which they had purchased in the US, and prepared to rent scuba tanks. Gabe chose an 11-liter tank for himself, while his wife used an 8.5-liter tank, which was unusually small for the location and potentially hazardous given her limited diving experience. Their initial attempt to dive to the Townsville Titanic was unsuccessful. Tina required a weight belt to descend, and Gabe initially struggled to operate the underwater computer, which monitors the safe rate of descent and ascent, as well as the oxygen levels in the cylinders. After returning to the boat to regroup, Gabe was able to use the computer, and they made a second attempt. The wreck lay at a depth of 49 feet, and Tina made the first descent, with Gabe following close behind. At first, everything was fine, but then Tina suddenly stopped, waved at me, and signaled she wanted to ascend. I recognized this as a panic response, which she had shown before. We were halfway up the dive at this point, so I decided to stay with her at the same depth to help her calm down and get used to the pressure. However, Tina continued to breathe rapidly and deeply, which was unsafe. Gabe realized she was sinking, and Gabe tried to grab her waist to hold her in place. But she swung her arms violently, knocking Gabe's mask off his face. While Gabe was putting his mask back on, Tina quickly moved away from Gabe. Gabe tried to swim after her, but he couldn't catch up. Gabe then decided to return to the surface to get help from the lifeguards. On his way to the surface, Gabe encountered another diver who appeared unconcerned and did not respond to Gabe's distress signals. There were 2 Asian divers with Gabe at the time, but neither confirmed Gabe's claim that he had attempted to help his wife. A subsequent police investigation, including analysis of underwater computer data, revealed that Gabe had initially attempted to swim to his struggling wife, but quickly abandoned the attempt, despite the relative lack of urgency to surface. Gabe followed standard procedure, ascending gradually and pausing at predetermined depth levels. However, the other divers later stated to the police that, in their opinion, Gabe had the opportunity to save his wife but chose not to do so. Furthermore, this incident occurred at the beginning of the dive, so Gabe had sufficient oxygen in his tanks to have potentially reached the ocean floor and returned to the surface without compromising his own safety. The rescuers quickly sprang into action after locating Tina, but unfortunately, it was too late. Tina found lying on her back at 82 feet, Tina received 40 minutes of artificial respiration on the yacht's deck, but these efforts were unsuccessful. Gabe kept his distance from his wife during the incident, standing off to the side and sniffing his nose, according to witnesses. However, other passengers reported that he was friendly and even played cards with them on the way to the shore. Gabe denied this in court. The autopsy results for Tina were not entirely clear-cut. While there were no obvious signs of a violent death, there were bruises on her neck and blood in her nostrils, which could be attributed to the 82-degree depth at which her body was found. There was no alcohol in her system, but high levels of ibuprofen and paracetamol were detected, which are commonly used to treat seasickness. A small amount of fluid was also found in her lungs. The report concluded that Tina died from drowning, but it's possible that she drowned after already being deprived of oxygen. An investigation by the Australian Water Police found no malfunctions with Tina's diving gear. It would have been easy for the police to dismiss the incident as a tragic accident. A novice diver ignored safety procedures and lost his life, a sad occurrence. However, several suspicious aspects of the case made it difficult to close the case. The autopsy results were inconclusive, and the dive team reported that the deceased's husband, Gabe, had been behaving strangely, inconsistent with the usual grief response of a husband who had just lost his wife. These conflicts dragged on as the investigation progressed, and Gabe realized that the detectives were watching him very closely. Furthermore, Tina's parents were unwilling to accept that the incident was an accident and wanted to see their son-in-law held accountable for failing to help her. During the initial interview, police observed Gabe in a state of shock, exhibiting erratic behavior, including crying, laughing, and jerking around. Gabe repeatedly asked to call his father, complaining of an earache and begging him to inform Tina's parents of this. Gabe was released late at night and went to the company's yacht to request a place to stay for the night. He explained that the trip was supposed to last 2 days, but due to his wife's death, they had only been there for 24 hours. He also asked for a refund of half the cost of the dive, as he never got to see the sunken ship. On October 24th, Gabe's mother flew to Townsville to support her son and help him find a lawyer. At Gabe's request, they visited the morgue to see his wife one last time. However, because Gabe was still considered a suspect, the morgue employee alerted the detective in charge of the case, who was recording the scene without Gabe's knowledge. Gabe was overcome with grief, crying and holding his wife's hand, and apologizing for not being able to protect her. Gabe's personality was a subject of conflicting opinions. Some people described him as a kind and humorous man, while others saw him as tyrannical. However, everyone agreed that Gabe and Tina's relationship was unhappy. Tina had previously confided in her friends and family that she had married Gabe out of fear of being alone, and her friends later confirmed this after her death. A friend of Tina's also came forward with a disturbing revelation. Shortly before her death, Tina had confided in this friend that Gabe had forced her to take out a life insurance policy on herself, naming him as the beneficiary. This was corroborated by the insurance agent who had sold them the policy. Furthermore, the taxi driver who drove the newlyweds to the yacht on the day of their departure told authorities that Tina had cried the entire way, while Gabe showed no concern for her distress. Amanda Phillips shared another story that sheds light on Tina's relationship. At a Christmas party, Gabe filmed her peeing in the bathroom, edited the footage, and then played it to a group of guests. He found it funny, but the other guests were embarrassed. The incident was disturbing, but another act was even more alarming. During a funeral, Gabe removed jewelry from Tina's body. However, an even more disturbing act was caught on camera during the 2008 trial. A video showed Gabe visiting Tina's grave, taking all the flowers and throwing them into a nearby trash can. Tina's father was determined to catch the person who stole the flowers from Tina's grave. He set up a hidden camera on the next row of monuments, but was shocked to see Gabe on the footage. Gabe's defense in court was that he and his wife had discussed the death of one of their relatives during their honeymoon, and that the absence of flowers on the grave was her request. However, this explanation seems very strange and unlikely. The investigation into Tina's death might have taken much longer if the police hadn't discovered a crucial piece of evidence. Gabe claimed that Tina had drowned while he was trying to put a mask on her face, but this story didn't add up. It was impossible for someone to put a mask on underwater without an air supply, unless they were using someone else's oxygen. In this case, the police suspected that Gabe had used Tina's oxygen to stage the incident. In November 2008, the Australian police arrested Gabe, and his trial began on June 5, 2009. Gabe initially pleaded guilty to failing to save his wife. He was convicted of negligent homicide and served 18 months in prison. After his release, he returned to the U.S., but was later charged with first-degree murder in a U.S. court. The prosecution's case hinged on the idea that Gabe had intentionally killed his wife in order to collect life insurance payouts. In his defense, Gabe's lawyer argued that the diving company was responsible for the death, alleging that their employees had failed to adequately ensure the safety of the tourists in their care. The lawyer alleged that the company was now trying to shift the blame to Gabe, fearing the loss of their business license. Gabe had already served his sentence abroad, and his lawyer argued that the insurance payout of $33,000 was outweighed by the costs of hiring lawyers and obtaining additional expert opinions. The prosecutor refused to acknowledge the irony that Gabe, a trained expert in drowning rescue, was unable to save his wife. When Gabe presented his defense, he spoke directly to the jury, expressing his emotional pain and frustration. "For 7 years, I have been haunted by the memory of that tragic day. The public has vilified me, accusing me of being responsible for my wife's death, labeling me a murderer. Not a single person has looked me in the eye and offered any compassion or understanding. Instead, many people want me to suffer, and I can only sympathize with my late wife's parents, who will understandably never forgive me, no matter how hard I try to make amends. While people often express sympathy for parents who lose a child, saying, "I can't imagine what it's like to lose a child," I've never heard anyone say, "I can't imagine what it's like to lose a spouse, especially on a honeymoon." I've been criticized for not doing enough to save my wife, Tina. I've already paid the price for that, and I've lived with the guilt for 7 years. Some of you might think I should have died with her, but I was afraid of death and wanted to survive. I wanted to live then, and I still want to live now. Regarding Gabe's case, the court found him not guilty due to lack of evidence. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Lindsay Cutshall. Lindsay Cutshall was born in 1982 in the small town of White Eyes, Ohio, to a devoutly Christian family. Her father was a pastor, and she was raised with strong religious values. Despite her strict upbringing, Lindsay was an adventurous and active child who enjoyed sports and later developed a passion for hiking and extreme tourism. After completing her education, Lindsay attended Appalachian Bible College in West Virginia, where she honed her outdoor skills. She regularly went on hikes, climbed mountains, and rafted down rivers, often organizing her own expeditions. Lindsay's dream was to establish a summer camp for children and teenagers, where she could teach them wilderness survival skills, rafting, and other outdoor activities. Jason Allen was born in 1978 in Zeeland, Michigan, to a deeply religious family. As a teenager, he became fascinated with hiking and wilderness survival. Jason was a tall, athletic, and charismatic individual who possessed natural leadership qualities, which drew like-minded people to him. He was passionate about exploring new heights and mastering outdoor skills. Lindsay and Jason met in 2002 during a hiking trip in the Appalachian Mountains. At the time, Lindsay was still a student, while Jason worked as a mountain guide and climbing instructor. They quickly formed a connection after meeting for the first time, leading the young man to ask for her hand in marriage just 6 months later. Both sets of parents gave their approval, and the young man proposed to his girlfriend with a beautiful diamond ring. Shortly after, he gave her a second engagement ring. As a couple, they made ambitious plans for their future. They intended to get married in September 2004 and buy a spacious house to raise a family. But things didn't turn out as expected. Before their wedding, they worked as senior counselors at a Christian summer camp called Rock and Water in California's El Dorado County. Their goal was to gain experience and eventually open their own camp after the wedding. On the Friday evening of August 14th, Lindsay and Jason decided to take a weekend trip to the San Francisco area. Before leaving, they informed their colleagues of their plans and left 2 experienced counselors in charge of the camp, ensuring a smooth transition. They told everyone they would return by Monday, expecting no issues for either themselves or their temporary replacements. With their plan in place, they set off in Lindsay's 1992 red Ford Tempo, and unfortunately, this was the last time anyone saw them alive. By Sunday evening, Jason and Lindsay, both counselors, had not returned to camp, but their absence did not raise immediate concern. It was assumed they would arrive late that night or early Monday. However, when they failed to appear at the Monday morning roll call at 8 a.m. and their phones were unreachable, their colleagues grew worried. The group quickly notified the police and then reached out to Jason and Lindsay's families to inform them about the situation. The parents went to the camp right away to get more information about the incident. Their colleagues were particularly concerned because Jason and Lindsay were known for their reliability and punctuality. If they had encountered any issues, they would have likely found a way to communicate. Upon arriving at the camp, law enforcement officials began questioning their colleagues, but the investigation quickly hit a roadblock. No one knew exactly where Jason and Lindsay had gone. They had planned to explore the San Francisco area, but their love for adventure and extreme activities made it likely that they were in a remote location with no access to communication or civilization. The police decided to wait for 48 hours, allowing the missing couple a window to possibly return home by themselves. In the meantime, concerned relatives and friends didn't want to delay any longer, and therefore decided to start searching. They reached out to everyone in their network, trying to gather information about the last time someone had contact with they. A missing person flyer featuring a photo of they was circulated, asking witnesses to report any potential sightings right away. By Tuesday, law enforcement had joined the search. The main focus was on the San Francisco area, its surrounding suburbs, and nearby localities. However, the large terrain made it challenging to thoroughly search every inch. A friend's insight that they frequently visited the secluded and picturesque rocky beaches led the police to concentrate on these locations. As the search effort dragged on for days, with several bodies found in sleeping bags in the targeted areas, the likelihood of finding they alive decreased significantly. On Wednesday, August 19th, a helicopter patrol spotted 2 bodies in sleeping bags on a remote rocky beach, indicating that the individuals were likely deceased rather than just resting. Upon arriving at the scene, police found a red Ford Tempo parked near a tourist shelter and a steep trail leading to a scenic beach. The car was identified as belonging to missing student Lindsay Cutshall after a database check. As officers descended the trail, they discovered 2 people in sleeping bags, who initially appeared to be sleeping. However, they did not respond to calls or noise. Closer inspection revealed that the individuals, a young man and woman, were deceased, with no signs of life. Preliminary examination suggested that they had been killed by gunshot wounds to the head, and the smell of decomposition indicated they had been there for over a day. All of their belongings, including phones, wallets, bank cards, and cash, were found next to them, ruling out robbery as a motive. The car keys were also visible, eliminating car theft as a motive. Investigators initially believed the deceased were the young couple who had gone missing near San Francisco the previous week. Documents found at the scene confirmed the identities of the victims as Lindsay Cutshall and Jason Allen. However, formal identification by their relatives was still necessary. When the parents arrived, they were overcome with grief upon recognizing the bodies of their children. The investigation led police to rule out initial theories of robbery or carjacking due to the presence of untouched valuables, money, and keys at the scene. Forensic analysis also showed no signs of physical or intimate assault on the bodies, except for the fatal gunshot wounds to the head. It appeared that Lindsay and Jason were peacefully sleeping and did not have time to react to the attack. They showed no signs of trying to defend themselves, escape, or even get out of their sleeping bags, indicating a sudden and deliberate act that was similar to an execution or a revenge killing. The brutal murder of 2 individuals on a secluded beach left investigators with many questions but no clear answers. The beach was difficult to access, and there were no signs of anyone else being in the area. Despite a thorough search, no shell casings were found, leading investigators to believe that the shooter may have taken them or thrown them into the ocean. The fact that the shots were fired at close range into the victim's head suggested that the casings should have been nearby if they hadn't been deliberately moved. A search of the area revealed an empty beer bottle a few meters from the crime scene. This was notable because Lindsay and Jason did not drink alcohol and led a healthy lifestyle, suggesting that the bottle may have belonged to the shooter. The brand of beer was unusual for the area and was more commonly found in a neighboring state. Although it was unclear whether the bottle was connected to the crime, it was considered a significant lead in the investigation. A theory emerged that Lindsay and Jason may have had a confrontation with someone the day before their deaths, and this person may have returned at night with a gun to settle the dispute. Although Jason and Lindsay were known for being friendly, it was possible they may have unknowingly offended someone. Additionally, the shooter may have been intoxicated or mentally unstable. Examination of the bullets found in the victim's skulls showed they came from a rare Marlin rifle, specifically a .45 caliber Model 18, produced in 1994 by Marlin Firearms Company. This type of rifle was typically used for hunting and was often part of a collector's arsenal. This discovery was a significant lead in the investigation, but it remained the only concrete clue at the time. Investigation suggested that the shooter was likely a lone male. He may have been a hunter, collector, or gun enthusiast. To further the investigation, authorities aimed to reconstruct their final route, identify who they may have contacted, and determine when they were last seen alive. Fortunately, they had taken many photos, and their camera was found intact among their belongings, which provided a useful starting point for tracking their movements. A guest book at a tourist cabin near the lookout point, where they had parked their car, contained entries expressing their delight with the weekend getaway. They had also visited a fishing pier about 20 miles away on Saturday, as evidenced by the photographs they took. Police officers returned to the pier and interviewed locals to find people who may have seen something significant. Several people remembered a young couple in a red car who inquired about overnight accommodations but found all 3 nearby hotels fully booked due to peak tourist season. They had dinner at a local restaurant, walked around the area, and took photos before leaving in the evening. According to those who saw and interacted with them, they was friendly, did not engage in any conflicts, and seemed carefree and happy. However, none of the witnesses could recall anything unusual or suspicious. The location where the bodies were found was a protected area, closed to camping. However, the young couple had nowhere else to stay overnight, so they decided to camp on the beach, using sleeping bags instead of a tent. They felt safe on the secluded beach on a warm August night and planned to return to the rock and water camp on Sunday. This information helped investigators narrow down the time frame of their deaths. Since they went to sleep but didn't survive until morning, it's likely they were killed between 11 p.m. on Saturday and dawn on Sunday. Despite the ongoing investigation and public appeals for information, police withheld certain details, including the results of the ballistics analysis. This action was taken to prevent the suspect from being tipped off and getting rid of the murder weapon before the investigation could start. The investigation first focused on a local homeless man who was known to sleep on the beach where the crime occurred. He was found and questioned by police, but despite not having an alibi for the night of the crime, he was not confirmed to be involved. The main reasons for this were that the murder weapon was never found and his DNA did not match the DNA found on a beer bottle discovered at the crime scene. The case went cold for nearly 2 years, but in the spring of 2006, police decided to release more information about the crime, including details about the weapon used. They also offered a $50,000 reward for any information that could help identify the perpetrator and solve the case. Following the public appeal, authorities received over 1,000 calls, but only a few were useful for the investigation. One individual, 26 years old Sean Gallen, drew particular attention from several locals who described him as an aggressive collector of firearms and blades. He was reportedly prone to conflicts, had a history of property damage, and frequently threatened violent behavior. The police investigated Sean Gallen and questioned him because they already knew him from previous incidents involving fights and drunk driving. Upon inspecting his possessions, Sean did possess numerous weapons but did not own the rifle in question. Authorities were unable to verify his whereabouts around the time of the crime due to the year gap, and his DNA did not match the sample found on the beer bottle at the crime scene, forcing his release. Meanwhile, international authorities were investigating another individual, 61 years old Joseph Henry Burgess, who made locals nervous due to his tendency to carry firearms and exhibit aggressive behavior. Burgess was described as erratic, often claiming he received orders from God, sparking suspicion that he could be the perpetrator. Joseph Burgess was living in Canada in the late 1970s, feeling lost and without a clear sense of purpose or direction in his life. In 1978, he joined the Children of God commune, presenting himself as a deeply devoted individual. Those around him considered him excessively zealous. A rivalry with two young members escalated into hostility, and shortly after, both individuals were found dead with multiple close-range gunshot wounds to the head. The circumstances of their deaths were particularly notable. Their bodies were discovered in sleeping bags on a beach, suggesting they were shot while asleep. By the time the authorities arrived, Joseph had disappeared. Although evidence left behind implicated him in the crime, he had already fled to the United States, crossing the border illegally. Joseph managed to evade capture for nearly 25 years until the police linked him to a double homicide in California. However, the opportunity to question him was lost when a shootout occurred during his arrest, resulting in the deaths of both a police sergeant and Joseph, who initiated the gunfire. This ultimately unresolved case remained shrouded in mystery. A 35-year-old man named Seamus Gallen was killed by his younger brother, Sean Gallen. The brothers had gotten into an argument, during which Sean, who was under the influence of illicit substances, shot Seamus 3 times with a gun. Sean had a history with the police, having been previously investigated for a double murder on a beach, but was released due to lack of evidence. Since then, Sean had been in trouble with the law twice for causing property damage and making threats, but only received fines. It was also discovered that Sean was an avid hunter and enjoyed making knives and other bladed weapons. People who knew him described him as antisocial, aggressive, and unpredictable. After killing his brother, Sean tried to run away but was caught almost immediately. The police decided to take another look at Sean's possible involvement in a crime that happened 13 years ago. They found useful information on his social media page, where he had posted pictures of his large collection of weapons and talked about his supposed psychic abilities. According to his posts, Sean believed he was on a special mission and was receiving instructions from outer space. Sean's behavior initially led police to suspect that he had serious mental health issues. He refused to cooperate with the investigation, spoke incoherently, and maintained his innocence. A new lead was found by investigators who examined private messages on the deceased brother's social media page, something no one anticipated. In 2006, a $50,000 reward had been offered for information about a double homicide case. Sean's former girlfriend had messaged his brother, suggesting that she could claim the reward by turning Sean in. It appeared that both the girlfriend and the brother had knowledge about the case, but they had chosen to remain silent. Unfortunately, it was no longer possible to question either of them, as the brother had been shot and the girlfriend had died in a car accident 2 years earlier. However, when Sean was shown the printouts of the messages between his former girlfriend and his brother, he made a shocking confession. Despite his initial denials, Sean began to provide a detailed account of the events surrounding the double homicide. His recollection of the details was vivid, even though more than 13 years had passed since the crime occurred. One evening, a man left his house with a Marlin rifle, planning to hunt in a nearby wooded area. However, after wandering aimlessly for a couple of hours, he decided to head down to a nearby beach, which he believed was a good spot to find wild boars. As he walked along the shore, he came across 2 sleeping bags with a young man and woman asleep inside. He stood there watching them for several minutes, when suddenly he heard voices in his head telling him to kill them. The man claimed that this was a mission from outer space that he had to carry out. So, he pointed his rifle directly at the young man's head and fired, instantly killing him. The sound of the shot woke she, but before she could even process what was happening, the man fired again, killing her as well. He then picked up the spent casings and put them in an empty beer can he had been carrying. Later, he threw the can into some bushes in his father's backyard, where he also hid the rifle, asking his father to keep it for him. Sean's father hid the murder weapon in the cellar of his old barn without asking any questions. Remarkably, Sean's account of the crime was later confirmed. When the barn eventually collapsed, the rifle was discovered at the site, and a beer can with shell casings was still hidden in the overgrown bushes in the backyard. The property's abandonment after Sean's father passed away in 2009 had helped preserve these key pieces of evidence. A beer bottle found on the beach was initially considered evidence, but it was later discovered to be unrelated to the crime. Sean claimed that voices in his head ordered him to commit violent acts and that he was not aware of his actions when he committed the crime. His defense argued that Sean was mentally ill and unfit to stand trial. The court relied on expert psychiatrists to assess the validity of these claims. The psychiatric evaluation found that Sean did indeed suffer from multiple mental health disorders, which were exacerbated by his use of alcohol and prohibited substances. However, the evaluation also showed that at the time of the crime, Sean acted with deliberation and careful planning, fully aware of his actions and the need to cover his tracks to avoid detection. Specifically, Sean deliberately killed the young man first, knowing that she would be less able to resist or defend herself if anything went wrong. Sean carefully removed the casings and handed the rifle to his father, instructing him to conceal it. Although psychiatrists diagnosed Sean with mental issues, they concluded he was mentally fit to stand trial and be held accountable for his actions. Notably, his family and former girlfriend were aware of or suspected his involvement in the double homicide, yet none of them reported him to the police. Sean's trial took place in the spring of 2019, nearly 15 years after the double homicide. On June 17, 2019, he was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms without parole, plus an additional 94 years for killing his brother in 2017. He is currently serving his sentence in a special prison unit for inmates with mental disorders. Due to his continued claims of hearing voices and aggressive behavior, he is closely monitored to prevent harm to himself or others. The motive behind the double homicide was never established. According to reports, Sean randomly encountered they sleeping on the beach and decided to end their lives without apparent reason. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lily James. Lily was born in the coastal town of Saintsue, New South Wales, Australia in May 2002. She was the first child of the close-knit James family and was especially loved by her maternal grandmother, Barbara. Growing up, Lily spent much of her time by the ocean with her younger brother Max, where she developed a passion for swimming and an active lifestyle. Her father, a water polo coach at an Anglican girls' school in Hustville, encouraged her interest in the sport. Those who knew Lily remembered her as a friendly and outgoing person who excelled in her studies and was always willing to help those in need. Her well-rounded personality made her a standout student, and she was widely respected by her peers. With her impressive talent and dedication, Lily succeeded in multiple areas, including academia, sports, and community service. She was also an accomplished performer, participating in her school's theater and dance club. Eventually, Lily's talents caught the attention of organizers from the prestigious Woodford Folk Festival, one of Australia's largest annual events, attracting over 125,000 attendees from around the world. As part of the celebrations, Lily performed a unique monologue from William Shakespeare's Macbeth. Her performance showcased her impressive skills, charisma, and stage presence, earning her a standing ovation and the jury's approval. She achieved second place in the theater category, a remarkable achievement that earned her recognition and a significant prize. In 2018, Lily achieved another milestone when she passed her beginner's driving test. Her athletic talents also flourished, particularly in water polo, a sport she began competing in professionally, following in her father's footsteps. She won the title of swimming champion in the under-17 category, a feat that delighted her parents. By her final year of school, Lily had decided to pursue a career in sports, and in 2020, she enrolled at Sydney Technological University to study sports business management. A turning point in her life. In early 2021, she started a new chapter. To break up her college routine and gain teaching experience, she took a job as a water polo coach at St. Andrew's Cathedral School. Her youthful energy, vibrant personality, and passion for sports quickly won over her colleagues, the school administration, and the students she was coaching. The students looked up to her and tried to meet her high standards. In return, she sought to understand each student's unique needs and strengths. That's when she met Paul, the new cricket and hockey coach. His impressive skills and charismatic presence quickly made him the center of attention. As a part-time teacher at another school and a member of the University of New South Wales hockey team, Paul was a driven and accomplished young man. He was particularly popular among the female students and staff. However, opinions about him were divided. Some saw him as arrogant and stubborn, while others appreciated his positive qualities. Initially, Lily and Paul's interactions were friendly but brief, limited to exchanging greetings. Over time, their relationship evolved into something more. Lily's friends reported that Paul asked her out on a date, and she found it difficult to say no due to his charming smile. The date had a profound impact on both of them, leading to a decision to meet again. As Lily got to know Paul better, she began to develop feelings for him, unaware of his true nature. Her kindness and openness made her vulnerable to falling in love. Paul appeared to return her affection, frequently complimenting her, giving her flowers, and planning evenings together. They decided to keep their relationship a secret, especially from the students at school. Lily and her boyfriend, Paul, had agreed to keep their relationship private, adhering to the school's policy and Lily's personal preference for discretion. However, as time passed, rumors about their relationship began to circulate, evolving from hushed whispers to open discussions. When Lily discovered that Paul was the one who had revealed their relationship, she felt deeply hurt and betrayed. Paul's portrayal of her had also led to criticism and judgment from others, causing Lily to feel humiliated. As a result, she confronted Paul about his actions and ended their relationship. Despite Paul's subsequent attempts to apologize and reconcile, Lily remained resolute in her decision. She took some comfort in the fact that their relationship had been brief, allowing her to see Paul's true nature before things escalated further. Paul was born in 1999 in the Netherlands to a wealthy and influential family. When his father's job required a relocation to Australia in 2015, Paul and his family made the move. As an only child, Paul received excessive attention and care from his parents, which significantly contributed to his character development. Unfortunately, this upbringing led to Paul growing up with an entitled and self-centered attitude. Paul was a high-achieving student who excelled academically, athletically, and was physically fit. After moving to a new location, he attended St. Andrew's Cathedral School, where he joined the cricket team and quickly gained recognition and respect from his peers for his exceptional skills. He eventually became the team captain and actively participated in organizing extracurricular activities and festivals. While he was well-liked by many, particularly they who found him charming, some of his male peers were put off by his confidence and boasts about his ability to win over any girl. Despite this, Paul's charm and charisma earned him many admirers. After graduating in 2017, the school administration offered him a position as an assistant coach for cricket and hockey, which he gladly accepted. He quickly took on a leadership role and successfully managed these sections, feeling confident in his abilities. However, by early 2018, he surprisingly resigned and returned home with his family, citing unknown reasons for his departure. Back home, Paul decided to further his education and earned a master's degree in sports management. Paul had a conversation with old friends and mentioned that he had improved his coaching skills, which led to a job offer from his former employer. He returned to Australia and started working at the familiar school in early 2020. To reduce living expenses, Paul agreed to share an apartment with a friend in Kensington, a suburb of Sydney. Initially, they enjoyed each other's company, socializing after work. However, a few months later, they had a disagreement, and Paul decided to live alone. His parents, who he couldn't visit due to the pandemic, felt that Paul was lonely despite being busy and surrounded by people. They weren't aware of any romantic relationships in his life. By the summer of 2021, as Paul resumed his regular activities, people began to notice a change in his behavior and personality. He picked up where he left off in the sports world, regaining his status as a key player on the hockey team and continuing his active lifestyle, even featuring in promotional advertisements. At the same time, those who knew him observed emerging characteristics that were not present before. Uncontrollable outbursts of anger became a concern. Furthermore, rumors circulated within the school community about his unusual interest in his female students. He would often engage in flirtatious behavior with teenage girls, staring at them for extended periods, leaving them visibly uncomfortable and embarrassed. Paul's importance in the hockey team's progress to the Australian Hockey League finals was evident despite the turmoil in his personal life. His recent breakup with Lily was likely a significant blow to his ego. Unexpected, on October 26, 2023, at approximately 4:30 a.m., the principal of St. Andrew's Cathedral School in central Sydney sent an email to students and parents announcing the school's closure until the end of the week due to a critical incident. A tragedy occurred at the school, prompting a thorough investigation. On Thursday and Friday, a 24-hour consultation center was established in the school library to support those affected. Forensic teams meticulously searched the school building and surrounding area, gathering evidence. The gym was closed off, and the adjacent shower area was scheduled for demolition due to the disturbing discovery made there. The incident began to unfold when the body of a 20-year-old woman was found in the shower around midnight. She had been seen alive just hours earlier. The water polo coach had entered the shower but never emerged. Surveillance footage revealed that someone had followed her around 8 p.m., but the pursuer left the area alone, heading towards the school exit. A family member was later asked to identify the body due to severe facial damage. The victim was identified as Lily James. As the police delved deeper into the case, surveillance footage played a crucial role, and the prime suspect, a young man, was caught on camera multiple times. Investigations were launched into Paul and Lily's cell phone records, helping police track the suspect's last known location using GPS. They also sought to recover the victim's phone, hoping to uncover evidence through text messages that could shed light on the events leading up to the crime. After successfully locating the devices, the police reconstructed the sequence of events, revealing that Paul had purchased a hammer from a hardware store just days before the crime. It seemed he was consumed by anger toward the victim and had planned a confrontation. On the morning of October 25, Lily followed her routine, attending the university and then heading to her job in the afternoon. Unbeknownst to her, her ex-boyfriend had other plans. Paul rented a silver Lexus and drove to the school, avoiding the building since he had no classes scheduled. He waited in the car, patiently biding his time. Once the students cleared out, he walked into the gym, concealing a hammer under his jacket to avoid drawing attention. From this vantage point, Paul observed Lily's movements, lying in wait for the perfect moment to strike. When Lily finished her training session and decided to take a shower, Paul saw his chance and followed her. An argument erupted, and in the heat of the moment, Paul attacked Lily, striking her head with the hammer. According to the pathologists, the impact was fatal, and Lily died instantly, without suffering. After waiting for an hour, Paul collected Lily's belongings and left the building. He then drove to Diamond Bay, where he disposed of the weapon in a trash can. Security cameras captured footage of him at the reserve at 8:47 p.m. His last known location, as tracked by investigators, was the Gap, a cliff in the eastern Sydney suburb of Vaucluse. As the community was still reeling from the initial tragedy, another shocking event occurred. On October 27th, at 8 a.m., shopkeepers at Diamond Bay Reserve in Sydney's eastern suburbs made a disturbing discovery. A man's body was found just 11 miles away from the site of the first crime. A rescue team, including a bomb squad and Marine Corps personnel, was formed to retrieve the body. The body was recovered at 3:30 p.m. and taken for identification. Due to severe injuries, fingerprints were used to identify the individual. The victim was 24-year-old Paul, the same person who had been at the scene of the first crime. The investigation team faced a significant challenge in establishing a connection between the fatal incidents and uncovering the circumstances surrounding the events. The Gap is a notorious location with a history of suicides. Around 10 p.m., Paul used Lily's phone to send a message to her father, possibly revealing the location of her body. An hour later, the young man made a brief emergency call, but hung up quickly. When police arrived at the cliff, they found the personal belongings of Lily and Paul, but there was no sign of him. A rented car was parked nearby, suggesting that he may have taken his own life due to feelings of guilt or fear of facing the consequences of his actions. On October 26th, police launched a search operation for his body, using helicopters and boats to scour the coastline. The first day's efforts were unsuccessful, but the next day, a body was found on rocks in a nearby nature reserve. With Paul deceased, the case was closed, and his parents collected his body, opting to cremate it in Sydney. A meeting was subsequently arranged with Tim Watson-Monro, a renowned forensic psychologist with extensive experience in analyzing the behavior of both criminals and victims. Mr. Watson-Monro was asked to share his insights on the incident and analyze the behavior of the perpetrator, Paul. According to Mr. Watson-Monro, Paul's actions were characteristic of individuals with an inflated sense of self-importance who struggle to accept rejection. He believed that Paul committed the crime in a premeditated and calculating manner, showing no remorse for his actions. When asked about Paul's decision to end his own life, Mr. Watson-Monro provided an explanation. Mr. Watson portrays Paul as a self-centered individual with psychopathic traits. Some have compared the tragic events to the finale of Romeo and Juliet, but the story of Lily and Paul is unique and unfolds in a distinct way. A genuine love relationship cannot thrive with pride, dishonesty, and betrayal. Unfortunately, Paul failed to grasp this, leading him to overlook the value of the person beside him. His decision to prioritize his own wounded ego ultimately resulted in the loss of a bright and vibrant life. This not only caused lasting pain for Lily's family but also for Paul's own loved ones. Regrettably, his actions left a devastating impact on those around him. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Michael Van Eck. Michael Van Eck was born on August 14, 1987, in a city that was once a hub for gold miners. He was the only son among four sisters, Natasha, Michelle, Bianca, and Friana, and grew up in a close-knit family. His parents were caring and provided a comfortable life for their children. Michael's father worked hard to establish his own business, while his mother created a nurturing environment at home that encouraged the growth and development of her children. Michael was a sociable and kind person who excelled in school and sports, earning a black belt in karate that gave him confidence. After completing his education, Michael trained as an electrician, a highly sought-after profession that offered good earnings and job prospects. He worked at the Beatrix mine in the small town of Unison, where he was employed at mine number 4. Not content to rest on his laurels, Michael continued his education to become an engineer. In 2011, Michael, then 23 years old, joined a dating site to cope with a recent breakup and expand his social circle. It seemed like a stroke of luck when he came across the profile of a sweet and smiling young woman that caught his eye. During the ongoing conversation, the man discovered that they shared common interests. Similar to him, she disliked loud parties and excessive drinking, and sought a genuine, meaningful relationship and a strong family foundation. Michael was pleasantly surprised to find a compatible match online. Living with his parents at the time, he shared his excitement and concerns with his mother. On April 2nd, he confided in her about his upcoming date and made an effort to prepare and make a good impression. He withdrew his first paycheck of 1,000 Rand from his account. The only thing that gave him pause was the unusual location his online friend had chosen for their first meeting, the city cemetery. To avoid worrying his parents, he kept this detail to himself. Around 9 p.m. that evening, Michael bid farewell to his family and left the house. He drove to the designated location in his silver Pajero 2007, a gift from his parents for his 18th birthday. As expected, she was running a bit late, but her appearance was striking. She from the internet arrived dressed in a pristine white dress and smiled warmly. The conversation flowed easily, and afterwards, she suggested continuing the evening elsewhere in the cemetery. She invited him to a secluded area with a blanket spread out on the grass, accompanied by a basket of fruit and wine. Michael and his friends had just finished their drinks when his beautiful companion suddenly kissed him. At first, the kiss was pleasant, but it quickly turned into a painful and horrific experience. Unbeknownst to Michael, this kiss was the beginning of a sinister plot. Jane van Heerden was born in 1991 to parents who were struggling in their marriage. When her mother discovered she was pregnant, they decided to put their divorce on hold and try to work through their issues. However, their efforts were unsuccessful, and the situation at home continued to deteriorate. Unfortunately for Jane, her mother resented her presence, seeing her as a constant reminder of her unhappy marriage. Even after the divorce, Jane's mother held on to her negative feelings, making it difficult for Jane to feel loved and accepted. Jane's behavioral issues and cold demeanor towards her children persisted even after her marriage ended. As a result, her 3 children felt isolated and misunderstood, with Jane, in particular, struggling the most. From a young age, she became withdrawn and sullen, displaying psychological problems. Her behavior became increasingly disturbing, as she frequently talked about death and created confusing artwork. She also developed an imaginary friend named Azael. Her grandparents, concerned about her well-being, suspected she might be possessed and took her to church for an exorcism. During the ritual, Jane's body convulsed, which was likely due to her fear of crowds and the intense anxiety she felt during the ordeal, possibly triggering an epileptic seizure. The traumatic experience had a lasting impact on her memory, causing her to develop a deep-seated fear of the dark. This phobia was further exacerbated by her mother's frightening statement that toys come to life at night, leading Jane to take drastic measures to protect herself, such as taping her doll's eyes shut and restraining them with shoelaces. Jane's mental condition took a turn for the worse as she entered preteen years. At 10 years old, she had a disturbing episode where she threatened a family guest with a knife while visiting her father. This incident prompted her family to seek professional help, and she was evaluated by a specialist who prescribed sedatives. The medication had a positive impact on her mood and overall well-being for a time. During a period of calm, Jane's father made a conscious effort to spend more time with her, often picking her up from school and taking her on hunting trips. He hoped that by sharing his hobby, he could provide her with the attention and connection she craved. Jane found enjoyment in her father's activities, particularly in tasks like butchering and skinning animals. However, this fascination led her to begin collecting and bringing home the carcasses of small animals, starting with rats and birds, and escalating to cats and dogs. She also took to cutting flesh and occasionally self-inflicted injuries. As it turned out, around age 12, Jane had befriended a man who introduced her to substance use and took advantage of her vulnerability. Fortunately, she ended the toxic relationship on her own, although her sisters had initially kept the situation hidden from their parents. Chane's emotional state was negatively affected by her chaotic childhood. At the age of 15, her mother left for New Zealand, where she started a new relationship and never returned to care for her children. Chane and her siblings were left in the care of their father and stepmother, who did their best to provide for them, but struggled to understand the depth of Chane's emotional issues. Her family initially attributed her behavior to typical teenage struggles. However, her situation took a turn for the worse when she became involved with a 22-year-old man who was interested in Satanism, occultism, and voodoo cults. He had a profound influence on Chane, but his cruel nature often left her feeling belittled and suppressed. Fortunately, Chane's life began to turn around with the support of her family and therapy. By the time she turned 17, she had distanced herself from the negative influences in her life, graduated from high school, and enrolled in college to study art and graphic design. As she lost interest in Satanism and stopped using substances that were harming her, her emotional well-being began to improve. Chane thrived in her studies and landed a job in her field, where she received support from both her colleagues and management. She discovered a natural talent for visual arts, earning her respect and recognition in her profession. At the same time, she began a romantic relationship with a man named Warren. To those outside her inner circle, Chane's life seemed perfectly ordinary. Her family and close friends avoided discussing her past, hoping that the difficult times were behind her. However, it was unclear what was happening beneath the surface. It's possible that her inner struggles were simply waiting to resurface. Her father, in particular, was overjoyed for Chane, believing she had finally found stability and would soon get married. However, his expectations were not fulfilled. A surprising challenge arose from Warren's friend Roy, a self-proclaimed sensitive person. Although Chane came across as kind and friendly, Roy detected something off-putting and even evil about her. He suspected that Chane might be unfaithful to his friend, so he decided to confront her about it. However, instead of answering his question, Chane became enraged and spat in his face, telling him to stop asking her ridiculous questions. At a party, Chane noticed Martin, a 24-year-old from a well-respected family. Despite his calm and sociable nature, rumors surrounded him. Born into a privileged family, Martin had a happy childhood, excelling academically and behaving well. However, at 6, he began experiencing hallucinations, convinced by an entity that he possessed incredible strength. As he grew older, his mental health declined, and his behavior changed due to struggles at school and home. At 14, Martin was hospitalized for psychiatric treatment and diagnosed with schizophrenia. Unfortunately, standard treatments were ineffective. His financially secure family dedicated themselves to finding alternative medications, eventually discovering the necessary drugs to control his condition, except for occasional aggressive outbursts. Martin was deeply affected by witnessing a stray cat being attacked by dogs. Instead of feeling revulsion or sympathy, he chose to hide the cat's body and observe it. This disturbing incident marked the beginning of his animal torture. He eventually dropped out of school and started working with his father in the carpentry shop, aspiring to follow in his family's footsteps. As he worked, his condition showed signs of improvement, and he lost the desire to harm animals. Feeling in control, he made the decision to stop taking his medication, despite concerns from those around him. However, this decision ultimately proved to be a grave mistake. Martin's mental state gradually declined, and it was during this time that he met Chane. Their relationship seemed happy and normal to outsiders, and their parents were initially pleased with their union. But neither set of parents was aware of the dark history of their children, and their relationship ultimately led to devastating consequences. Initially, they was outgoing and social, attending parties and interacting with others. However, acquaintances began to notice cuts on their hands, which they jokingly attributed to intimate experiments. Over time, they became increasingly reclusive and developed an interest in dark and occult practices, including Satanism and voodoo cults. They also became fascinated with notorious serial killers. In February 2011, Martin posted a photo of himself and Chane on social media with the caption, "Killers," accompanied by a cryptic emoji. At the time, no one suspected that the post was anything more than a joke. Meanwhile, Martin asked Chane's father for permission to marry her, which was met with enthusiasm. However, unbeknownst to those around them, they harbored a sinister secret. Instead of dreaming of a future together, they fantasized about ending their lives in a violent manner. These dark fantasies eventually evolved into a twisted plan to torture and kill homeless individuals. They even practiced their twisted intentions on animals, due to unable to find a suitable human victim to carry out their heinous plan. Chane created a profile on a dating site, which caught the attention of a young man named Michael Van Eck. Chane and her partner, Martin, targeted Michael for their sinister plans. They began flirting with Michael online, and after a few days, Chane suggested they meet in person. Despite the unusual location, Michael agreed to the meeting. Chane and Martin carefully planned the encounter, considering every detail, including their attire and the means to commit a crime. Chane approached the meeting prepared, while Martin hid behind tombstones, waiting for a signal. When Chane kissed Michael, it was the agreed-upon signal for Martin to attack. He struck Michael with a knife from behind, but Michael unexpectedly resisted. Chane intervened, and together they inflicted around 30 knife wounds on Michael. As Michael begged for an end to his suffering, Martin slit his throat, ultimately killing him. The perpetrators then dragged the body onto a blanket and began to carry out their plan. They cut off the victim's legs at the knee and severed his head. The dismembered body parts were placed in bags. The perpetrators attempted to bury the body at the site, but they encountered a problem that they had no shovels. As a result, they were forced to dig a shallow grave using only their hands and knives. After managing to bury the body only halfway, the perpetrators left the scene, taking the severed body parts with them. They used the victim's vehicle to make their getaway, with Martin initially driving, but later handing over control to his accomplice. However, the adrenaline rush from their crime made it difficult for them to focus on the road. Once they arrived home, they stored the bags containing the body parts in the refrigerator, treating them like ordinary groceries. After Martin had somewhat composed himself, he got into the victim's car and drove it to a high-crime neighborhood, hoping that it would be stolen. He left the car unlocked with the keys in the ignition to make it an easy target. A cemetery worker noticed bloody stains and torn clothing in the bushes near the grave. After alerting his supervisor, they called the authorities to report the gruesome find. The police were immediately notified, and an investigation was launched. Meanwhile, Michael Van Eck's parents were frantic with worry. Their son had been unreachable since the previous evening, which was unusual, even if he had stayed overnight with his internet girlfriend. When Michael failed to show up for work, his employer called his parents to ask about his absence. Around the same time, police received a report about an abandoned car with blood stains on the trunk. The vehicle was identified as belonging to Michael Van Eck through a database search. Further investigation revealed that the car had been parked at the cemetery for an extended period. With this new information, police officers visited the Van Eck residence, where they confirmed their suspicions. Michael's mother had been searching for him since the previous day. The officers then asked her to come to the cemetery, where forensic experts and search dogs were working to locate missing body parts. The investigation revealed that the victim's mother identified her son's body through distinctive burn marks he had sustained in childhood. The autopsy confirmed that the victim had suffered multiple knife wounds and showed signs of a struggle. The body had been dismembered after death, which suggested that the perpetrators had some level of expertise in this area. The number and nature of the wounds, as well as the strength required to subdue the victim, indicated that multiple attackers were involved. DNA testing later confirmed the identity of the victim as 23-year-old Michael Van Eck. During the investigation, police seized the victim's cell phone and computer, which revealed that the last person he had communicated with was Cheyne Van Heerden. According to their messages, she had invited him to meet at the cemetery on the night of his death. Detectives brought Cheyne in for questioning, and she arrived with her boyfriend, Martin. Both were interviewed separately and eventually confessed to being involved in the victim's murder. Upon learning of the incident, Cheyne's father rushed to the station, where he was shocked to hear the accusations against his daughter. When he asked her if the allegations were true, Cheyne calmly confirmed her involvement and stated that she would willingly do it again. She claimed that she had fantasized about committing such a crime ever since she started hunting with her father. This cruel confession shocked not only her father but also everyone present. As the case gained public attention, Cheyne's boyfriend, Martin, also showed no remorse. Instead, he seemed to enjoy the public scrutiny and posed for cameras. It became clear that neither Cheyne nor Martin felt any regret for their actions. Investigations revealed that they had planned to take their own lives if caught, but Martin's changed his mind, and Cheyne followed suit. They wanted to live a life of notoriety, embracing their dark impulses. A search of their apartment revealed a disturbing environment. The walls were adorned with distorted portraits of Cheyne, depicting her without eyes, mouth, or ears. The rooms also contained ritual items, animal scalps, knives, and other objects of unclear purpose. Police found the deceased young man's belongings, including his glasses and wallet, which Martins later confessed they had taken to prepare their next crime. The most disturbing discovery was made in the refrigerator, where police found Michael's severed head with his mouth sewn shut. It is believed that the perpetrators intended to use his head as a ritualistic bowl. The victim's eyes and ears were found in separate containers. Additionally, the victim's hand and leg were discovered buried near the murderer's home, alongside the remains of various animals. The perpetrator's diary revealed horrific thoughts and plans for future crimes. The evidence collected during the investigation made it clear that the perpetrators had planned to commit multiple crimes, and that the process of taking lives and mutilating bodies brought them immense pleasure. Martin and Cheyne underwent multiple evaluations to assess their mental competence. The commission confirmed that they were aware of their actions and understood the consequences. In November 2011, Cheyne's trial took place. Despite this being her first offense, she was treated as a serial offender. She openly expressed her desire to repeat her actions and told the court that she understood she should feel shame or remorse, but couldn't. She could only comprehend the severity of her actions through societal standards and the reactions of others. Psychiatrists diagnosed Cheyne with psychopathic and antisocial disorders, which made her more dangerous than her boyfriend. However, she was skilled at hiding her true nature. Throughout the sentencing, Cheyne remained impassive. She was found guilty and sentenced to 35 years in prison without the possibility of parole, 20 years for taking a life and an additional 15 years for robbery and dismemberment. Martin defended himself in court, claiming he didn't remember the events until he was in jail. He admitted to studying Satanism and occultism, and said his relationship with Cheyne led them to commit the crime. He apologized to the victim's parents, but his words seemed insincere. He was found guilty and sentenced to 35 years in prison, with a chance for parole after serving half his sentence. Even in prison, Martin expressed his passion for Cheyne in letters, calling her a dark goddess. However, Cheyne eventually ended the relationship, feeling they had grown apart. While incarcerated, Cheyne proved to be a model prisoner, using her time to teach art and theology to her fellow inmates. In contrast, Martin, while also in prison, gained a small group of admirers who were carefully monitored by police to prevent them from copying his crimes. During his imprisonment, Martins focused on personal growth, completing his education through correspondence courses and undergoing therapy. Their stories serve as a warning that ordinary individuals can hide dark secrets. Michael, a kind and compassionate person, was manipulated by two individuals with twisted motivations. This tragic event emphasizes the importance of being cautious about the people we surround ourselves with, as their influence can have a profound and lasting impact on our lives. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Adam Strong. Adam Strong was born in 1972 in Cornwall, a small town in Stormont County, Ontario. Little is known about his family and early life. He remained single and childless, working as a gas station attendant and a security guard on film sets. Those who knew him described Adam as quirky and eccentric, often coming across as superior to others. He enjoyed debating and arguing to prove his point, but was not typically confrontational. A review of his social media profiles revealed Adam's interest in BDSM practices, which he openly discussed and shared photos and videos about. Although he never had a long-term partner, some former partners accused him of being a sadist who subjected them to physical and emotional abuse, leading to the end of their relationships. Adam also had a peculiar hobby of writing reviews of adult films and magazines. It appeared that watching such content was a significant part of his free time. Despite his unusual interests, Adam presented himself as a calm and composed individual, showing no outward signs of a troubled or criminal nature. The story took an unexpected turn 4 months later when at the end of December, when David Wood's family moved into the house at 19 Macmillan Drive in Oshawa, they were immediately struck by a strange and unpleasant smell. Their downstairs neighbor, Adam Strong, a 45-year-old single man who lived in the other half of the house, reassured them that it was just a minor plumbing issue that he would fix within a few days. Although Adam was friendly and polite in his communication, there was something unsettling about him that put the Wood family on edge. When David's wife tried to welcome him with some homemade cookies, Adam wouldn't even let her into his apartment. Instead, he stepped out into the hallway, closing his door behind him. In that brief moment, David's wife caught a glimpse of Adam's living space, which was in disarray, and the smell inside was overpowering and foul. Adam borrowed cookies from his new neighbor and quickly left. Later, when they met in the yard, he apologized for not inviting her in, explaining that his apartment was a mess due to upcoming renovations. Despite his efforts to be polite, he seemed nervous. As the Wood family settled into their new home, they tried to ignore a persistent smell. However, on December 29th, they called a plumber to fix a sewer blockage, which had intensified the stench. The problem seemed minor, but what the workers found in the pipes shocked even experienced forensic experts. Plumber Sean Funn and his partner began to clear the blockage in the Woods' apartment. Although they were accustomed to unpleasant odors, they were surprised by the terrible smell inside. They soon realized they needed to investigate further and descended to the apartment below, which belonged to a man named Adam. Adam reluctantly let the workers in, apologizing for the mess. The smell was even worse in his apartment, and when the plumbers reached the source of the blockage, the stench became unbearable. Sean, a seasoned plumber, had never encountered anything as foul-smelling as this in his years of practice. However, an even more disturbing discovery awaited him and his team when they decided to clear the pipe. Adam, already on edge, became increasingly agitated, refusing to step away and bombarding the workers with questions about their methods and estimated time of completion. He later claimed he was simply curious, having never witnessed this process before. The specialists tried to brush off his behavior, but their efforts were soon overshadowed by the gruesome discovery of over 10 kilograms of flesh, hair, and bone fragments in the pipes. Sean was horrified to find disfigured and partially decomposed human fingers among the debris. Adam feigned surprise, claiming he had never seen anything so disgusting, and then asked the plumbers if they had any idea how this could have ended up in the sewer pipe. Sean decided to call the police immediately to report the disturbing discovery. He informed them that he had likely found human remains and provided the address. He made sure Adam didn't touch or disturb anything, preserving the evidence. When the officers arrived, they quickly confirmed that Sean's suspicions were correct. Human flesh had been extracted from the pipes. The police then spoke with the Adam. He admitted that a woman's body had been stuck in the pipe. He even revealed that other body parts were stored in his refrigerator's freezer. Upon investigation, the police found a severed head and limb fragments packed in plastic bags, which were too large. The house was extremely filthy and cluttered, with a kitchen filled with dirty dishes and rotting food, as well as trash covering the floor. Empty pizza boxes were scattered around, and numerous magazines of an explicit and masochistic nature were present among the mess. Various adult toys, gags, whips, handcuffs, and restraint devices were also discovered. Adam Strong was arrested at the scene and taken to the police station for questioning. His arrest puzzled the authorities, as he had no prior run-ins with the law and was not a person of interest to the police. Mr. Adam had resided at 19 McMillan Drive in Oshawa for over 10 years, dating back to 2007, without incident or complaints from neighbors. The House of Horrors at 19 McMillan Drive, Adam's residence, was secured and guarded as a crime scene. An initial inspection revealed a complex and time-consuming process lay ahead, with investigators expecting to uncover more shocking evidence. The discovery of a head in the refrigerator was just the beginning. Evidence found at the scene led law enforcement to suspect a connection to Rory Hash, whose torso had been recovered from a body of water 4 months earlier. A tattoo on the neck and subsequent DNA analysis confirmed that the discovered remains belonged to Rory. Further investigation revealed blood-stained clothing and shoes belonging to she, hidden among trash in various rooms of the house. The bedroom was particularly disturbing, with blood traces found on the bed, walls, furniture, and ceiling. These bloodstains were later confirmed to belong to a missing schoolgirl. A dissection table was also found in the kitchen, suggesting it was used to dismember and gut the victim. The entire scene was gruesome, with blood, skin particles, hair, and bone fragments scattered everywhere, causing nausea in those who witnessed it. The bathroom was extremely dirty and unsanitary, with signs of a violent crime visible everywhere, including dirt, blood, and broken fixtures. The toilet was dismantled and lay in a corner, surrounded by garbage. It appeared that the perpetrator, Adam, had attempted to dispose of a body by cutting it into pieces and flushing them down the sewer. However, he encountered a blockage and, when his attempt to fix it failed, left the scene in disarray. Inside the house, a large number of sharp objects were discovered, which likely had been used to dismember the victim. Some of the objects, including knives, still had blood on them. Further analysis of the evidence, including DNA samples, revealed that Adam had semen on fragments of the victim's body, which had been found in the refrigerator. Rory Hash was born on July 9, 1999, in Oshawa, Ontario, to Shannon Dion, a single mother. Rory's father was not present in her life, having left before her birth. Despite this, Rory grew up in a loving and supportive family environment provided by her mother and maternal grandmother. Rory's family had an unconventional background, with her maternal grandfather founding and leading the motorcycle club Satan's Choice. He was also a skilled boxer with connections to organized crime. Additionally, Rory's uncle was a member of the Hells Angels motorcycle club and led a troubled life, frequently encountering legal issues. However, this did not affect Rory's childhood, which was remarkably peaceful and carefree. Rory excelled academically and had a passion for dance, winning awards in competitions. Those who knew her described her as intelligent, responsible, and compassionate. At the age of 13, Rory earned top honors as a cadet in her local army unit, showcasing her exceptional qualities from a young age. At 15, Rory's life took a downward turn. A friend introduced her to drugs, and she quickly became addicted. She started spending time with the wrong crowd, neglected her schoolwork, and eventually stopped attending school altogether. For about a year, her family tried to help her overcome her addiction by sending her to various treatment centers, but she relapsed each time. At 17, Rory ran away from home and began working in the sex trade to support her habit. Rory eventually sought help from a specialized service for teenagers struggling with addiction. With their support, she was able to enter mandatory treatment and turn her life around. She found a job at a local shop, studied remotely to earn her high school diploma, and even started thinking about attending college. Rory also started a serious relationship with a boy named Anthony, and they decided to move in together in the spring of 2017. When Rory discovered she was pregnant, she was nearly 18 and felt ready to take on the responsibility of motherhood. Her mother supported her decision, but was unaware that Rory had started using illicit substances again. In mid-August, Rory met with Crane at a shopping center. Crane had been keeping an eye on her for 18 months to ensure she didn't fall back into her old habits. During their meeting, Rory revealed that she had started using drugs again and had lost her job a month prior. She also admitted to exchanging intimate favors for money or drugs. Crane was deeply concerned and promised to help. He asked Rory to wait while he made a call to arrange for her to be hospitalized. However, when he returned, Rory was gone. The next day, Rory's mother and uncle took her to the hospital after finding her in a state of incoherence due to substance use. They left her in the emergency room queue for about an hour, but when they returned, Rory was nowhere to be found. Security footage showed that she had simply gotten up and walked out of the hospital. Her family reported her missing the following day, but despite a thorough search and widespread social media attention, Rory was never seen again. Rory's exact circumstances of arrival at Adam's house are unknown, but it is probable that she went there seeking drugs in exchange for sex. The investigation started when Adam informed the police about the location of Rory's remaining body parts. Initially, investigators anticipated Adam would admit to the crime, but when he was taken to the station, he became uncooperative, refused to answer questions, and denied any involvement in Rory's death, all while remaining calm. The only charge filed against Adam was desecration of a body, as there was not enough direct evidence to link him to the murder. Despite his lawyer's efforts, Adam was not granted bail and stayed in jail until his trial. Investigators attempted to get Adam to reveal more information by provoking an emotional response, but he remained cautious and avoided discussing Rory's visit to his house and his potential involvement in her death. However, Adam freely talked about his interest in bladed weapons and his large collection of knives. A search of Adam's house uncovered a significant piece of evidence, a dirty hunting knife hidden in a closet with dried skin fragments that appeared to be human. DNA testing revealed that the samples on the knife did not match Rory's, but belonged to someone else. It took several months to identify the person, but by July 2017, investigators had confirmed that the DNA on the knife belonged to Candace Fitzpatrick, she who had gone missing about 10 years earlier. Candace shared many similarities with Rory Hash. Both struggled with addiction and had run-ins with the law. They came from troubled families and often ran away from home, sometimes disappearing for months at a time. To survive, they would often exchange sex for food and other necessities. Candace was born in 1989 and was 18 when she disappeared. Her family did not realize she was missing until almost 2 years later, by which time any potential leads had gone cold. Many people believed that Candace's lifestyle and social circle meant she could have gone anywhere. For 10 years, her parents thought she might have run away and would eventually return home. However, news from law enforcement in 2018 destroyed their hope of ever seeing their daughter alive again. A striking feature of the case was the physical resemblance between Candace and another victim, who was the same age. The police believed they had caught a serial offender. The suspect, Adam, also confessed to harming Candace. However, Adam refused to provide information about Rory unless the police agreed to improve his prison conditions. He wanted a private cell, a large TV, internet, and his favorite meals. Although law enforcement was outraged by Adam's demands, they agreed in order to gain valuable information. Adam began by sharing his troubled childhood, revealing that he was abused by his stepfather from age 5 and started harming animals at age 7, deriving physical pleasure from these acts. He also discussed his unusual intimate preferences and expressed frustration at not finding a partner who shared these interests. When discussing Rory, Adam described in detail how he had dismembered her, seemingly taking pleasure in the act, but later regretted his plumbing had failed him. However, when questioned by police, Adam denied responsibility for her death, claiming she had died from an overdose and he had only disposed of the body. When asked about Candace, a case from 10 years prior, Adam was caught off guard and attempted to learn how the police had discovered the connection. Upon hearing about the human remains found on an old knife, Adam became subdued and regretted not taking better precautions to avoid detection. He admitted to meeting Candace but denied killing her. Despite a lack of evidence to support his claims, Adam unintentionally incriminated himself during the investigation. In an attempt to gain sympathy, he shared his account of events. However, when informed that the victim, Rory, was pregnant at the time of her death, Adam strongly denied this fact. The police noted that the pregnancy was in its early stages, and therefore not visibly apparent. Adam claimed that he would have noticed if she was pregnant, sparking a realization among the investigators that he would stop at nothing to argue his point. To uncover more information, the police told Adam that Rory was pregnant, which led him to attempt to prove the contrary. In his eagerness to refute this, he shared graphic details about how he had personally examined her body and held her reproductive organs in his hands. Adam's account was detailed and included his physical sensations, describing the flesh as soft and warm. At one point, he even mentioned feeling a pulse. These statements raised suspicions that Rory may have still been alive at the time. Unfortunately for Adam, his entire narrative was captured on camera, and his incriminating statements were presented as evidence in court. When confronted about his earlier statements, Adam tried to retract his previous admissions, but it was too late. The defendant, Adam Strong, refused to reveal what he had done with Candace's body, and despite extensive searches, her remains were never found. Investigators also failed to identify any other potential victims. During one of the final interrogations, Strong showed no remorse, saying, "I don't know if it matters, but I'd like to extend my condolences to her parents." During the trial, Strong's lawyers argued that he was mentally ill and therefore not responsible for his actions, claiming he needed medical treatment rather than punishment. However, the court had to decide whether he was sane and accountable for his crimes or if he should be committed to a psychiatric facility instead of serving time in prison. A psychiatric evaluation found that although Strong had certain mental health disorders, he was aware of his actions and could be held legally responsible. Strong's trial began in September 2020, 3 years after Rory's death and 12 years after Candace disappeared. He was charged with 2 counts of murder and desecration of Rory's remains. Although he never admitted guilt, the evidence found in his home and his statements during interrogations confirmed his involvement in these horrific crimes. 4 of Adam's former partners testified against him, describing his cruel and violent behavior. The prosecution presented evidence that Adam had lured 2 women to his home with promises of money in exchange for intimate services that catered to his specific preferences. Once they were in his home, he would immobilize and torment them for an extended period. In the case of Rory, he likely killed her during the ordeal because he feared she would report him to the police. On September 4th, a signal from Adam's phone was detected near the city harbor, where he had discarded Rory's torso, hoping the current would carry it away. In April 2021, Adam Strong was found guilty of murdering Candace Fitzpatrick and Rory Hash, as well as desecrating Rory's remains. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Adam showed little remorse, stating that his prison cell was an improvement over his previous living conditions. 6 months after his sentencing, Adam unexpectedly revealed the location of Candace's remains. Following his directions, the police conducted a months-long search that ultimately led to the discovery of human bones. DNA testing confirmed the skeleton's identity as young Candace Fitzpatrick, and this was officially announced. Investigators now strongly suspect that there may be at least one more female victim in the Adam case. During Adam's initial interrogation, his personal belongings were seized, including a chain with 3 rings. Adam asked for the chain's return, explaining that the rings held sentimental value and he didn't want to lose them. Relatives of Rory and Candace later identified 2 of the rings as belonging to their daughters, but the origin of the 3rd ring remains unknown. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lindsay Wilson. Lindsay Wilson was a kind and loving young woman. Lindsay had a deep-seated need for connection and love. Her major misstep was that she misjudged her partner and invested herself in their toxic relationship. Lindsay was 17 when she found out she was pregnant. Growing up in a loving and supportive family, she had never expected to become a mother so young. Although she was emotionally mature, what made it even more difficult was that her boyfriend, whom she had been dating since she was 13, abandoned her as soon as he learned he was going to be a father. His sudden departure left Lindsay feeling both upset and scared. Lindsay was all too familiar with the physical and financial strains of motherhood. Her family, the Wilsons, were loving and close-knit, but they had often struggled to make ends meet. Despite their financial challenges, Lindsay's parents had always worked hard to provide for their children. When Lindsay met Mitchell, 5 months into her pregnancy, she felt like she had been given a rare gift. Mitchell, who was 20 years old at the time, was attentive, caring, and gentle. What impressed Lindsay most was that her pregnancy didn't deter him. Instead, he was eager to be involved and supportive. Mitchell told Lindsay that he had fallen in love with her at first sight and wanted to spend the rest of his life with her, raising her child as his own. To show his commitment, Mitchell began working overtime to ensure that Lindsay and their unborn child would not have to worry about anything. 20-year-old Mitchell was a true gentleman. He was attentive and loving to Lindsay, despite her delicate condition. In fact, Mitchell had fallen deeply in love with her at first sight and wanted to spend his life with her, including raising her child as his own. At the time, Mitchell was earning a good income. However, when they announced their decision to get married, their parents were shocked. They felt that their 5-week relationship was too short to withstand the challenges and circumstances that came with marriage. Despite their concerns, Lindsay's relatives noticed a positive change in her since being with Mitchell. She had regained her cheerfulness and good health. However, some of them found Mitchell's behavior to be a bit insincere. Nevertheless, no one interfered with their decision to get married, and instead chose to keep their doubts to themselves. The wedding took place in August 1995, surrounded by a small, intimate group of family and friends, mostly from the bride's side. The groom's side was noticeably underrepresented, with only his parents, a brother, and 2 friends in attendance. Despite the celebratory atmosphere, Lindsay's relatives couldn't shake off their uneasy feelings about the union. However, Lindsay herself was over the moon, believing she had found her perfect match. As the evening wore on, their happiness was short-lived. A disagreement erupted, and the newlyweds' argument played out in front of their guests. The reason for Mitchell's outburst seemed trivial, and his reaction was disproportionately intense. The situation escalated, with Mitchell grasping Lindsay's hand and violently shaking her, leaving everyone in attendance stunned and uncomfortable. Mitchell appeared agitated and threatening, causing concern. When he calmed down, he apologized to everyone and made light of the situation, attributing his behavior to holiday stress. Although Lindsay didn't think much of the incident at the time and soon forgot about it, it was actually one of the warning signs of their toxic relationship. After getting married, Mitchell and Lindsay moved into an apartment in Southport, away from their parents. They started their life together and soon welcomed a baby girl named Robin. However, Lindsay soon discovered that her husband had a volatile temper, which cast a shadow over the joy of their new family. Mitchell's moods were unpredictable. One moment he was happy and joking, and the next, he would become aggressive and unreasonable. She thought she was maintaining a delicate balance at home, but in reality, she was giving in to his control. He dictates her every move and gets angry if she misses a phone call or doesn't pick up. Their arguments often ended with Mitchell begging for forgiveness and declaring his love. For a while, it seemed that peace had been restored, but their cycle of arguments became more and more intense. Lindsay struggled to recognize who she once loved. She frequently shared her concerns with her relatives, who urged her to leave the relationship and end her suffering. However, Lindsay found it difficult to acknowledge her mistake and admit defeat. Lindsay's relatives noticed that she often dwelled on memories of the past. Whenever her husband promised to change and return to his gentle and caring ways, Lindsay wanted to believe him and waited for him to fulfill his promises. Meanwhile, Mitchell's controlling behavior intensified. He restricted Lindsay's freedom, forbidding her from going out alone in the evenings and eventually requiring her to be accompanied by him at all times. Despite his possessiveness, Mitchell was seen with other women, sparking Lindsay's suspicions of infidelity. Lindsay confided in her older sister about her concerns, sharing an incident where a woman visited their home, unaware that Mitchell was married. This revelation led to another argument, which escalated into physical violence. Physical abuse gradually became a part of Lindsay's life. To control her and protect his reputation, Mitchell started limiting her interactions with others. He began by restricting her contact with neighbors, friends, and acquaintances, and eventually with her family. Lindsay, unhappy and fearful of being caught and punished, tried to secretly maintain contact with her loved ones. Despite the problems in their relationship, Lindsay stayed with Mitchell. One reason was the comfortable life he provided. He had a good income, supported her and their child, and paid the bills, leaving her without any financial worries. Lindsay's life changed dramatically when she found herself pregnant again. Although her husband, Mitchell, was a good father to her daughter from a previous relationship, she felt that having another child would be unwise in their current circumstances. She decided to have an abortion. When Mitchell found out about her decision, he became furious and verbally and physically abused her. Lindsay packed her belongings and took her daughter to her parents' home. Her family was relieved to see her. At first, Lindsay was happy to be apart from her husband, Mitchell. But over time, she started to miss him. Mitchell, eager to win her back, would call her constantly, begging her to return. Despite initial reservations, Lindsay was eventually won over by Mitchell's claims that he had changed. Everything seems to be back to normal, they are even looking forward to another child. However, their happiness was short-lived. After 6 months, Mitchell's violent temper flared up again. Although he didn't harm Lindsay, who was pregnant at the time, he unleashed his fury on their apartment. He smashed furniture, ripped doors off their hinges, and damaged the walls. He even threw their television out the window and vandalized their car. The landlord, fed up with the destruction, demanded that they pay for the damages and move out. The family's financial situation became even more dire. As a result, they was forced to take out a significant loan and downsize to a smaller, more modest apartment. In October 1997, Lindsay gave birth to their son, Jack. Mitchell was overjoyed at the arrival of his child. However, the relationship between the spouses continued to deteriorate over time. Mitchell often left home for extended periods, sometimes for just a few days, sometimes for an entire week, frequently citing trivial or made-up reasons. Although Lindsay had grown accustomed to her husband's behavior, she eventually reached her breaking point and filed for divorce, returning to her parents' home when Mitchell abandoned her once again. Lindsay realized she couldn't handle the separation from Mitchell on her own, so she reached out to a local charity that supports women in crisis. The charity helped her find affordable housing in a different city, allowing her to start fresh. However, she was worried that Mitchell would find out her new contact information, so she took steps to protect herself. When Mitchell began making threats, she took it a step further and got a restraining order from the police. With the help of a therapist, Lindsay started rebuilding her life. She kept a journal to document her experiences, intending to use it as a warning for her children in the future, so they wouldn't make the same mistakes she did. The journal entries supported what her relatives had said about the problems within the family. Unfortunately, despite her efforts to stay hidden, Mitchell eventually discovered her phone number and began calling her constantly, demanding to see their son. Lindsay, now free, soon felt lonely and couldn't resist her ex's persistence. They started talking and seeing each other again, eventually moving back in together. Ashamed of her weakness, Lindsay kept this a secret, but it eventually came out. Her relatives and friends were shocked and disappointed by her reunion with he they considered a tyrant, and they couldn't understand why she had taken him back. Her relatives continued to dislike Mitchell and cut off most communication with him. Despite their efforts to help her, Lindsay repeatedly returned to the abusive relationship. As a result, her loved ones eventually gave up trying to save her, accepting the situation and distancing themselves. This time, however, Lindsay's decision would prove to have devastating consequences. After Lindsay disclosed her situation, a social worker began monitoring the young family. However, the social worker reported that she had been unable to contact Lindsay for several weeks. Every time she visited the home, Lindsay's husband, Mitchell, would answer the door, and he was also the first to answer any phone calls. Despite the social worker's repeated requests to speak directly with Lindsay, Mitchell would make excuses and prevent her from doing so. The social worker would leave her contact information, but Lindsay never returned her calls. The social worker became concerned for Lindsay's safety and requested a welfare check. When law enforcement responded to the report and visited the address, they too were unable to speak with Lindsay. Mitchell claimed that he had not seen his wife at home for a long time, but he did not consider her missing. Mitchell said that Lindsay participated in a party with a friend on Christmas Eve, returning home early in the morning somewhat intoxicated. This led to an argument with Mitchell. Following the argument, Lindsay packed her belongings and left without saying goodbye to the children. Mitchell claimed Lindsay had left him for another man and no longer wanted to have any contact with him. Mitchell's subsequent media appearances sparked widespread attention. He presented himself as a worried and abandoned husband, pleading for Lindsay to return. However, during these interviews, he also shared intimate details about their marriage, occasionally speaking negatively about his wife. Mitchell believes that Lindsay's actions stemmed from a desire for a lavish lifestyle. He said to have seen her driving an expensive car, which he thought was proof that she had left their children for a wealthy man. Despite her public image, Mitchell was enjoying the freedom of a single life. The search for Lindsay began with conversations with her relatives. During these conversations, it was learned that she was last seen by her family on December 11th. At that time, she appeared to be in high spirits and looking well, with her behavior being normal. During their investigation, detectives were surprised that no one had expressed concern about the young wife's whereabouts for 2 months. However, they soon discovered a plausible explanation. Mitchell had a history of limiting his wife's interactions with others, even close relatives. In the past, her family had difficulty staying in touch with her due to Mitchell's controlling behavior, which made it more believable that Lindsay had intentionally kept a low profile for an extended period. The news of Lindsay's disappearance alarmed everyone, despite the initial assumption that she was not the type to be concerned about. She was known for her modest lifestyle and never drank. Additionally, her husband had restricted her from having any contact with the outside world, including friends and acquaintances. Several inconsistencies in Mitchell's statement to the police raised suspicions about his character. It seemed unlikely that Mitchell would willingly let his wife leave, and that Lindsay would not abandon her children to a controlling husband. To clarify the situation, the police conducted a thorough investigation, interviewing all of Lindsay's acquaintances and searching for anyone who may have seen her after the family gathering. They also questioned their neighbors and obtained surveillance footage from the residential complex and surrounding areas. Lindsay's disappearance was not immediately noticed, and by the time it was. However, investigators later discovered that she was last seen in person on December 15 at the local post office, where she sent several letters and postcards. Her older sister confirmed that they met that day, despite Mitchell's disapproval. During their brief conversation over tea, Lindsay handed her sister a note and asked her to read it later. Unfortunately, the sister forgot about the note in her purse and was unable to find it later, leaving its contents a mystery. As the months passed, investigators grew increasingly suspicious that she was no longer alive, given her prolonged absence and lack of contact. Although they couldn't charge Mitchell without sufficient evidence, their suspicions about him intensified as they learned more about their history and relationship. Lindsay's parents and detectives suspected Mitchell was involved in her disappearance, but lacked concrete evidence. Searches at their home and nearby turned up nothing. In a televised interview, Mitchell denied any wrongdoing, even claiming Lindsay's family would eventually apologize for suspecting him. Just before the holidays, Mitchell sent a postcard and hair dye to the lead investigator. The postcard's sarcastic message mocked the detective, implying he needed confidence and to cover his gray hair. This gesture showcased Mitchell's arrogance, despite portraying himself as a victim in the media. The investigation team held an interview to clarify some aspects of the case, but they didn't reveal all the details. They suggested that Mitchell Key, a well-known family man, was not what he seemed to be. In 2000, Mitchell Key found himself at the center of a scandal when it was discovered that he had been forging his wife's signature to claim social benefits. Although this revelation indirectly supported the theory that he was involved in Lindsay's disappearance, the investigators had trouble making progress due to Mitchell's popularity. Many people defended him, arguing that as a single father, he needed financial assistance. Despite this, the detectives were able to charge him with fraud. Mitchell was found guilty and sentenced to a month of community service. Mitchell's situation took a turn for the worse. The forged signature of his missing wife raised more than a few eyebrows, and the public's outrage grew. As the criticism mounted, Mitchell's composure began to fray, and he lashed out at the media for invading his personal life. In a groundbreaking development, a visitor to an amusement park on June 1, 2000, stumbled upon a disturbing discovery that rekindled the Lindsay disappearance case. Their dog's strange behavior near the roller coaster led to the discovery of human remains. Forensic analysis confirmed the remains belonged to Lindsay, revealing she had been the victim of a violent crime. This breakthrough shifted the investigation's focus to finding the person responsible. On June 7, Mitchell was questioned by detectives for over 36 hours, during which time he eventually cracked under the pressure and confessed to murdering and dismembering his wife. According to his testimony, Lindsay had asked for a divorce on December 15, 1998, after meeting with her sister. This request enraged Mitchell, causing him to attack and strangle her in front of their children. He then hid her body in their bedroom, taking steps to conceal the smell. Realizing he needed help to dispose of the body, Mitchell turned to his brother Elliot, a butcher, for assistance. Although Elliot was initially hesitant, Mitchell eventually convinced him to help. While their children played in the next room, the brothers dismembered Lindsay's body and later scattered her remains throughout the city. The murderer showed no remorse or empathy during his confession. Instead, he seemed to take pride in his actions, saying that without his confession, they would never have been able to prove his guilt. He then led the authorities to the locations where he had hidden the victim's body parts. Unfortunately, her head and one hand were never found. The forensic examination confirmed that all of those of Lindsay, leaving no doubt about Mitchell's guilt. The trial of the Mitchell brothers took place in January 2001 and was a relatively straightforward process. Mitchell was found guilty of first-degree murder and received a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 17 years. A court-appointed psychiatrist observed that Mitchell displayed classic characteristics of a narcissist with sadistic tendencies. Elliot, Mitchell's brother, was sentenced to 7 years in prison for his role in covering up the crime. Lindsay's children were taken care of by her grandparents, who gave them their last name. 3 months after the sentence, the Wilson family faced another tragedy when one of Lindsay's older brothers, unable to cope with the loss, took his own life in the family's attic. In his goodbye note, he expressed his desire to reunite with Lindsay, saying he saw no point in living in a world he considered cruel. As of 2017, Mitchell Key, Lindsay's murderer, became eligible for parole, but as of January 2023, his parole requests have been denied 3 times. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Georgine Kruger. Georgine Kruger was born on April 11, 1992, in Munich. She was the middle child of 3 siblings. Her family was relatively simple, with an older brother, Tommy, who was 8 years older, and a younger sister, Michelle, who was 2 years and 2 months younger. When Georgine was 11, her parents decided to separate. Her older brother, then 19, chose to live with their father. After the divorce, Georgine and her younger sister were primarily raised by their mother and their maternal grandmother. They sisters were high-achieving students who shared a passion for music, dance, and creativity. After their parents' divorce, their father remained in contact but focused on his older son. In 2006, the mother and daughters moved to Berlin, where the mother had a new job. They settled in the Mobit district and the sisters enrolled in a local school. Georgine had big aspirations, dreaming of a career in acting, singing, and dancing. She was fascinated by Indian films and participated in her school's theater program, taking acting classes. Her teachers recognized her natural talent, predicting success and fame. Georgine was striking, with a slender yet feminine figure and notable height. During summer breaks in Berlin, Georgine pursued opportunities in the entertainment industry, attending castings. Although she landed a few small roles as an extra, her big break came on September 22, 2006, when she auditioned for a guest role on Turkish for Beginners and was selected for the part. Georgine was set to finalize her casting details on September 25. At her new school, her striking beauty drew attention from male classmates, but female peers were slow to warm up to her due to envy. Despite her friendly nature, she struggled to connect with them. Her talents, including singing and dancing, even led to a modeling agency offer. Georgine had agreed to attend a photo session in early October, but sadly, Georgine never made it. Tragically, her aspirations were cut short when she vanished without warning, just a few miles from her home. At the time, Georgine was waiting to confirm her role in a TV series and was confident it would happen. Over the weekend, Georgina couldn't think about anything else, eagerly awaiting the call from the studio that would determine her future. Georgine was excited and inspired as she imagined herself working on a movie set. She had an important call coming later that day and had asked her grandmother to answer the phone since she expected to be home by 2 o'clock. After school, Georgine quickly gathered her belongings and headed to the bus stop, boarding the same bus she rode every day, bus number 27, and started her journey home. Georgine got off the bus at Ruarov, a short walk from her house. However, Georgine never arrived home. Somewhere between the bus stop and her apartment, she vanished. Despite efforts to locate her, Georgina was never seen again. Her grandmother had been expecting her to return from school by 2 p.m. and had prepared lunch. Georgine was supposed to arrive first, followed by her sister Michelle, who had music classes that day. However, Georgina failed to show up, which was unusual, as she was eagerly looking forward to her call and had no plans to stay out. When Michelle arrived home at 3 o'clock, her grandmother couldn't find Georgine. She tried calling, but Georgine's phone was off. Michelle's mother arrived home from work and was informed of the situation. She suspected something was wrong and called the school, confirming Georgine had attended classes and taken the bus home. She then contacted Georgine's friends, but they said she had hurried home. The concerned women reported the Georgine disappearance to the police. Initially, the police were skeptical, thinking she might have gone out with friends, had a disagreement with a classmate, or was simply upset and alone in a park. After investigating these possibilities and verifying that Georgine was not in any of these locations, the detectives started checking accident reports and contacting hospitals, considering the possibility that she might have been injured or harmed on her way home from school. Georgine was not admitted to any hospital. As night fell, an extensive search effort began, including witness interviews. The last reported sighting of Georgine was at the bus stop where she got off and started walking towards her home. Georgine was wearing blue jeans, a light blue t-shirt, a denim jacket, and gray sneakers, and was carrying a pink sports bag with a long strap containing her school supplies and phone. By tracking her device's signal, investigators were able to confirm that Georgine spent the day at school, boarded the bus, and got off at her stop. However, the signal suddenly disappeared about halfway to her home and never reappeared. A search team with dogs was sent to Georgine Street, hoping to find her alive. Police searched homes, interviewed residents and workers, and checked attics and basements, but no one had seen Georgine and the dogs found nothing. The next morning, flyers were posted throughout the city. Dozens of calls came in about sightings, but all turned out to be false leads. At the same time, investigators started looking into previously convicted local residents, as well as those who had been released on bail. They paid special attention to individuals with a history of crime and those who had shown an unhealthy interest in minors. However, these efforts did not yield any results. Georgine seemed to have vanished into thin air, leaving behind no traces or personal belongings. After several months of searching without finding any leads or clues, the investigation was suspended. The police had no idea which direction to pursue. However, about a year after Georgine's disappearance, an anonymous caller contacted the police station, claiming that Georgine's body was at the bottom of a nearby lake. Although the authorities were unable to identify the caller, they decided to investigate this new information. A thorough search of the lake bed was conducted by highly skilled divers using advanced equipment. Despite their meticulous efforts, no sign of Georgine was found, and the lead ultimately proved to be false. However, this new development sparked renewed public interest in the case, and the media began to discuss and write about Georgine once again. As a result, the police decided to launch another search operation. They re-interviewed neighbors and brought in search dogs, although it was unlikely that this would yield any results. The dogs had been unable to detect Georgine's scent on the day she disappeared, and a year had now passed, making it even more improbable that they would find anything. Despite the investigators' confidence that the Georgine was no longer alive, the Georgine family refused to accept this reality. The mother, in particular, clung to a fantasy that her daughter had run away to India to pursue a career in Bollywood, singing and dancing as Georgine had always dreamed. This comforting delusion allowed her to cope with her loss and continue living for the sake of her younger daughter. In 2016, nearly a decade after Georgine's disappearance, a disturbing incident led to the resurgence of the "monster next door" search efforts. A Stendhal Street resident reported a neighbor who was inviting underage girls to his home. This neighbor, Ali K., a 35-year-old Turkish immigrant, initially appeared to be a respectable family man, married with 3 children. However, further investigation revealed a far more sinister reality. Upon closer examination, police discovered that Ali had been under investigation 4 years earlier for a similar offense. He had lured a local schoolgirl to his basement apartment with the promise of selling her a trendy smartphone at a low price. There, he struck her on the head, coerced her into an intimate act, and then forced her to remain silent. He even provided her with a paper napkin to wipe away her tears and helped her clean up before allowing her to leave. Although she had promised to remain silent to escape her attacker, she immediately confided in her parents about the incident as soon as she was safe. Together, they reported the incident to the police, revealing Ali's violent actions. The schoolgirl described his basement storage room, which resembled a chaotic space. The man, Ali, was arrested on the same day, but he strongly denied any wrongdoing and provided his own account of events. According to Ali, he was selling a gadget, and she had expressed interest in buying it. They went to the basement together to examine the device, where she allegedly said she couldn't afford it but was willing to pay in another way. Ali claimed that she started kissing him and undressing, and when he tried to push her away, she fell and hit her head, explaining her injuries. However, Ali maintained that no intimate contact occurred, as he had used protection which he later disposed of. Ali's wife, Malik, supported her husband's version of events and accused she of attempting to seduce him. Ultimately, Ali received a suspended sentence for causing moderate bodily harm. Now, with the police re-examining the disappearance of Georgine, they decided to investigate Ali thoroughly once again. Ali was a man without a steady job, relying on odd jobs and government benefits to get by. He had a passion for gambling, which often led to debt. Despite his financial struggles, he made an effort to present himself well, wearing fashionable clothes and trying to appear younger than his age. He would sometimes even use his children's benefits to fund his wardrobe. Ali was a regular at the Turkish coffee shop in his building, where he would meet new people and often receive free food and drinks. However, there was a peculiar aspect to his personality. He had a strong attraction to teenage girls. He would frequently approach them, ask inappropriate questions, and offer them things they shouldn't have, such as help buying alcohol or cigarettes. The police brought him in for questioning, but Ali denied any involvement in the decade-old case. A search of his storage room in the basement did not turn up any evidence of the missing schoolgirl. However, detectives noted that the space seemed more like a meeting place than a storage area, which added to the suspicion surrounding Ali. Detectives discovered that Ali had significant debts, unknown to his wife, after losing around 10,000 euros in poker, and he was struggling to find a way out of this financial predicament. The investigation chose to focus on a key aspect and decided to introduce an undercover agent into the suspect's inner circle. The agent's mission was to gain the suspect's trust, extract vital information, and obtain a recorded confession. To achieve this, everything had to be done gradually and with caution, to avoid arousing the suspect's suspicion and to make him feel secure. A special agent, codenamed Hakan, was carefully prepared for this task. He posed as a successful businessman who had recently relocated to the Mobit area to open a car service station. Hakan had visited the cafe in Ali's building a couple of times before, where he would openly discuss business plans with a partner. As they were leaving one day, the partner mentioned that they urgently needed to find a manager for their company, emphasizing that it was a well-paying position and that they needed to choose the right person. After the partner left, Hakan stayed behind to finish his coffee. That's when Ali approached him and sat down at his table. Ali took the opportunity to offer himself for the manager position, and they started talking. The conversation quickly turned into a casual chat, and the man thought Ali might be a good fit for the role. He mentioned the salary, and Ali's eyes widened at the figure. Ali started imagining all the things he could do with that kind of money, like paying off his debts and buying the sports car he had always dreamed of owning. Hakan and Ali exchanged phone numbers and began communicating regularly, quickly developing a friendship. Hakan even started taking Ali on business trips to other cities, aiming to build trust with him. One day, while out for drinks with a friend, Hakan revealed that he wanted to get rid of his blackmailing girlfriend once and for all, and he was willing to pay 100,000 euros to someone who could take care of the problem. His friend Ali expressed interest in the task, but they agreed to discuss the details when they were both sober, in a private setting. Hakan confessed to wanting to eliminate his girlfriend, calling her a nuisance, during a private conversation in a parked car. Ali doubted Hakan's ability to harm someone, so he claimed to have taken a life with his bare hands over 11 years ago. Ali became infatuated with a young girl who moved onto his street in 2006. He would often greet her and offer compliments. One day, he lured a neighbor girl to his basement, locked the door, and attempted to kiss her. When she resisted, he struck her, knocking her unconscious, and took advantage of her. Fearing she would report him, Ali grabbed her throat, applying pressure until she lost consciousness. The trial concluded 2 years later. Despite limited evidence, the detailed confession convinced the jury of his guilt. Ali K. was sentenced to life imprisonment in March 2020, nearly 14 years after Georgine's disappearance. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Paula Salazar. Paula Salazar was born on September 6, 2015, in Venezuela to parents Andrina Bermudos Milian and Leonardo Salazar. Her mother was from Machorina, Minagas, while her father was from Tucupito, a town in the state of Delta Amacuro. A year later, in September 2016, the family decided to move to Ecuador in search of a better life. However, their new life in Quito, the capital of Ecuador, was short-lived. Just a month after their arrival, the relationship between Andrina and Leonardo began to deteriorate due to various reasons. They eventually broke up, and Andrina decided to move to Cuenca, Ecuador's third-largest city, with Paula. A mother's friend kindly offered them temporary accommodation while they settled and found work. Meanwhile, Leonardo returned to his hometown of Tucupito in Venezuela. After spending some time, Leonardo decided to move to Trinidad and Tobago. At that point, Leonardo had already been dealing with a long-standing disability resulting from a serious motorcycle accident that occurred during his youth, which had left his left arm completely unusable. Leonardo struggled to find decent work due to his physical limitations. After Andrina moved to Cuenca, she almost completely stopped communicating with Leonardo, only informing him once that she had taken a job on a farm in Tapacundo. Some months later, Andrina formed a romantic bond with Washington Andreas Aymaro. Interestingly, Andreas happened to own the same farm in Tapacundo where Andrina was employed. When Paula was around 18 months old, Andrina moved in with Andreas, bringing Paula with her. Later, on April 7, 2019, Andreas and Andrina had a child of their own. The arrival of the new baby brought immense joy and unity to the family. Life was going smoothly for the family, with the farm thriving and everyone enjoying each day. However, their happiness was short-lived. On March 27, 2020, a life-altering event occurred, changing the course of their lives forever. On that fateful day, Andreas took Paula to the flower plantations. During the car ride, Paula suddenly became ill, feeling dizzy and nauseous. Andreas was forced to stop at a public restroom, where Paula vomited again. He decided to leave her alone for a few minutes to retrieve a change of clothes from the car, as Paula's clothes were soiled. When Andreas returned, he found Paula lying with her head in the toilet bowl. He pulled her out and attempted to administer first aid before rushing her to the hospital. However, by the time they arrived, Paula had already passed away. The doctors who examined her body noticed that Andrea's story didn't add up. They found bruises on Paula's body and face that couldn't have been caused by the events Andreas described. As a result, the doctors contacted the police, who arrived soon after and arrested Andreas as a suspect in Paula's murder. The autopsy later revealed that Paula's death was not an accident, contradicting Andreas' claim that she had drowned in the toilet bowl. The autopsy results revealed that she had been dead for approximately 24 hours before arriving at the hospital, contradicting the foster father's claim that he had administered first aid and CPR just 20 minutes prior to hospitalization. The autopsy also showed that she had suffered severe injuries, including broken ribs, multiple microtraumas, a cracked spine, and sepsis, which ultimately led to her death. Paula's death was initially reported as an accident, but an examination of her body revealed numerous injuries, both old and new. Leonardo Salazar, Paula's father, did not learn of her death until 33 days after it occurred. After Leonardo left Ecuador, Andrina began a new relationship and severed all ties with him. As a result, Leonardo was unaware of Paula's tragic fate for 3 days. During this time, he could only keep up with Paula through photos sent to him by Andrina and their mutual friends. Leonardo learned of his daughter's death. But Andrina's family told him a different story, claiming Paula had died from -19 complications. During this time, Ecuador was under quarantine due to the pandemic, like the rest of the world. But unusually, there were very few -19 deaths in the country. Leonardo was naturally skeptical about his daughter's alleged cause of death and quickly began researching Ecuador's -19 mortality statistics, which were publicly available on social media. Leonardo reached out to Andrina every day for 10 days, but she didn't return his calls until he'd been trying to contact her for almost 2 weeks. When they finally spoke, Andrina told him that Paula had died from -19, but she claimed her lawyers wouldn't allow her to share more information. On the same day she contacted Leonardo, she visited the morgue to begin making arrangements for her daughter's funeral. Despite a prosecutor requesting more time to examine the body, the funeral proceeded on April 10, 2020. Andrina refused to allow a second autopsy to be performed. Through social media and friends, Andrina's friends contacted Leonardo, sharing information about Paula's difficult life in the years before her death. They provided Leonardo with the details they had gathered, which included recordings of conversations, photos, audio recordings, and other similar evidence. According to witnesses, Paula faced mistreatment not only from her stepfather but also from her own mother. Observers reported that Paula was only seen happy when she played alone around Andreas, suggesting that her distress occurred during interactions involving multiple individuals, especially when Andreas was near Andrina. Typically, Paula appeared depressed, acted shyly, and became easily startled. She eventually confided in acquaintances that her mother and stepfather physically punished her for misbehaving. She further revealed that Andreas once pushed her as punishment, causing her to hit her head against the wall. She expressed her deep-seated fear of Andreas by calling him a monster. Paula was plagued by nightmares and struggled with insomnia. When she moved into her Andrina's home, her parents initially required her to sleep alone, ignoring her cries when she had trouble falling asleep. They also refused to help her get tucked into bed, leaving her to do it on her own. Furthermore, her mother, Andrina, had begun teaching her how to cook at an unreasonably young age. Paula was forced to prepare her own breakfast and dinner, as her mother preferred to sleep in late and take breaks from childcare in the evenings. Andrina seemed unconcerned about the dangers of having a preschool-aged child cook for herself, despite the risks involved. This neglect was part of a larger pattern of indifference towards Paula's well-being, as Andrina simply did not want to care for her daughter. A young girl repeatedly complained of pain in her legs and back to her teacher, claiming she couldn't walk. Due to her persistent complaints and visible bruises, the teacher took her to the school's health center. After an examination, doctors suspected she was being mistreated at home. The teacher contacted a special police unit to investigate her family for potential abuse. Authorities took up the case and temporarily relocated she to a safe location while the investigation was ongoing. On October 16, 2019, she, Paula, was temporarily placed with her uncle, Andrina's brother. A court hearing was scheduled for December 4, 2019, but the teachers who were set to testify failed to appear. As a result, the hearing was rescheduled for February 27, 2020. Unfortunately, the teachers didn't show up again, and the court was forced to drop the charges against Paula's parents. With no evidence, Paula was returned to her mother. Tragically, 1 month later, on March 27, she passed away. Following Paula's death, Andreas was initially placed in protective custody during the investigation. However, he later appealed this decision, leading to a court hearing on June 12, 2020. During the video conference hearing, the judge set a restraining order and decided that Andreas could be released to house arrest. Yet, in a surprise move, Andreas dropped his appeal. Meanwhile, Leonardo was running a social media campaign and sought financial support to travel from Trinidad and Tobago to Ecuador, with the goal of filing a complaint against Andrina, Paula's mother, before it was too late. At the time, Andrina had not been charged and was free. Leonardo was fortunate to receive financial assistance and free legal advice from two kind-hearted Ecuadorian lawyers, Oswaldo and Alejandro. To reach Ecuador, he had to take a perilous journey from Trinidad to Venezuela, crossing the border by raft and then continuing on to San Cristobal. Leonardo started his journey into Caira and entered Colombia, then traveled through rugged terrain to reach Ipiales. From there, he made his way to the Rumichaca Bridge, which marks the border with Ecuador, and eventually arrived in Quito, where he met with a lawyer on June 30th. Meanwhile, a formal complaint had been filed by Leonardo against Andrina, and as a result, Andrina was charged on July 6, 2020, and was subsequently put under house arrest. Andrina and Andreas were charged with murder, an offense that carries a maximum prison sentence of 13 years. In November 2020, Leonardo's lawyer raised concerns about the possibility of Andrina fleeing the country due to a past incident where she attempted self-harm. As a precaution, the judge ruled in favor of fitting Andrina with an electronic monitoring device, reducing the need for her to attend court hearings twice a week, making them only once a week instead. Andrina later asked the judge to reconsider the decision to wear an electronic monitoring device. A second hearing was held on November 16 to consider this request. Despite these delays, the judge eventually scheduled a trial for December. Due to the pandemic dominating the news, some key events were not reported. The trial began on January 14, 2021, with Andreas being held at the Regional Detention Center. The trial was closed to the public and no media representatives were present. Some participants joined via video link. The autopsy report revealed that Paula had suffered severe and brutal injuries, including damaged spinal discs, broken ribs, and previous fractures that had healed. However, the infection that caused her death was a result of injuries she sustained later on. The report also confirmed that Paula had been dead for approximately 24 hours by the time Andreas took her to the hospital. The extent of her injuries indicated extreme cruelty and brutality. Additionally, the autopsy showed that Paula was severely malnourished, underweight, and deficient in essential minerals and nutrients, with her physical condition being significantly worse than expected for her age. Paula's mother, Andrina, dismissed the severity of Paula's injuries and instead implied that Paula's issues were psychological and that she hurt herself intentionally to seek attention. Andreina attributed the change in Paula's behavior to her feeling neglected after her brother was born. Just a few months after Leonardo left Ecuador in 2017, she began to experience abuse. It is likely that the abuse started immediately after her mother, Andreina, started a relationship with Andreas. Over 40 witnesses testified against Andreina and Andreas, confirming that Paula suffered abuse for at least 3 years. At the final hearing before the verdict, Andreina took sole responsibility for the abuse, claiming she was the one who hit Paula with a belt in her fists. She claimed Andreas was innocent and had never mistreated Paula. Andreina also stated that she punished Paula for causing problems in her relationship with Andreas. The judges were concerned about Andreina and Andreas' newborn son, but it was clear that the child had not been abused like Paula. Andreas has chosen to remain silent about the incident since his arrest on February 3, 2021. The trial for Paula's murder was concluded, and both defendants were found guilty. The maximum sentence for this crime is 13 years, but the chief judge considered an aggravating factor. Paula was only 4 years old and unable to defend herself. As a result, the judge sentenced they to 17 years and 4 months in prison. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Maria Alejandra Lafuente Casco. Maria Alejandra Lafuente Casco, a stunning brunette with bright brown eyes and thick black eyelashes, lived in Mexico City. Alejandra took great pride in her appearance, considering herself the epitome of female beauty. Alejandra's success wasn't limited to her physical appearance. Her father, Dr. Alberto Dente, was a renowned psychiatrist with a doctorate in sciences. Following in his footsteps, Alejandra had built a successful career of her own. Alejandra's father was a renowned scientist specializing in psychiatric disorders. She idolized him and aspired to follow in his footsteps, enrolling in the top psychiatry university and graduating with honors, thanks to her hard work and his connections. After completing her studies, Alejandra shifted her focus from psychiatry to psychotherapy. With her father's financial support, she obtained a license and set up her own practice in a prestigious business center in the capital. Alejandra's first marriage, to her ex-husband, ended in divorce, but she has 2 beautiful daughters who have inherited their father's eyes and sense of humor. Despite this failure, Alejandra still hopes and continues to dream of finding a partner who can be a good father to her daughters. After the divorce, her ex-husband would visit the children regularly on weekends, helping with housework and spending time with them. During one such visit, Alejandra asked him to enter the house through the backyard, claiming that the front door was jammed. Little did he know that this would be his last visit. Once inside, Alejandra told him that their youngest daughter was taking a bath and asked him to go into the bathroom with her. The ex-husband walked into the house, not knowing what was about to happen. The eerie silence was a complete contrast to the usual bustling atmosphere. There was no sound of cartoons or children's laughter. The ex-husband went to the bathroom. He noticed the tape on the floor and his daughter was not in the bathtub full of water. A feeling of unease began to appear, and he suddenly realized that something was very wrong. At that moment, Alejandra appeared behind him, holding a hammer, and hit him on the head with all her strength. She struck another blow, and the ex-husband collapsed to the ground, blood pouring from the open wound on his skull. A horrific scene unfolded as the ex-husband lay covered in blood. Experts later determined that he had no chance of survival, and that death occurred almost immediately after the first blow. The eldest daughter, who had unexpectedly returned home early from a friend's house, happened to witness the horrific scene. The children were no strangers to their parents' frequent quarrels, but this time the situation had escalated to a deadly level. The daughter, shocked and distressed, ran away from home and called for help. A neighbor responded quickly and called the police. Authorities arrived promptly and arrested Alejandra, charging her with murder. After her arrest, Alejandra was held in a cell for a month until her first trial. Throughout the proceedings, Alejandra maintained her innocence. Her lawyers argued that she had acted in self-defense, citing her ex-husband's history of intense jealousy. According to the defense, her ex-husband fabricated statements that Alejandra had brought men into the house, which allegedly affected the mental health of their daughters. On the day of the incident, Alejandra's ex-husband unexpectedly showed up at her home, entering through the back door in an attempt to catch her with another man. When he found Alejandra alone in the bathroom, he attacked her. In self-defense, Alejandra struck her ex-husband twice in the back of the head. After considering the evidence and taking into account the presence of Alejandra's 2 young daughters, the court delivered its verdict on June 14, 2012. Alejandra was sentenced to 1 year and 4 months in prison. However, thanks to her lawyer's efforts and financial support from her father, her prison sentence was suspended and she was released. A few months later, the appeal was refiled, this time with a request to dismiss the charges. The defense argued that she had acted in self-defense. Human rights activists advocated for a jury trial, sympathizing with she who was portrayed as a victim of domestic violence. The court reviewed the case and ultimately acquitted her. After her release, she resumed providing psychological counseling. Alejandra successfully created a public image of a victim of gender inequality who fought for her rights and emerged victorious. This image boosted her popularity among potential clients. Around this time, she met Alan Carrera Cuellar, a prominent Mexican businessman, the son of Adrian Carrera Francis, a former head of special services for the Central District who had enjoyed a distinguished career. Alan was a tall, handsome, and statuesque man. Alan soon expanded his business and opened a chain of construction stores across the country. However, his success came with a hidden cost. Part of his business was connected to organized crime, and this fact was kept hidden from most people. Unfortunately for his family, his involvement in financial fraud eventually came to light, resulting in his father losing his job. As it turned out, Alan had a significant stake in a criminal organization that smuggled psychotropic substances into the United States. The group operated from a base in a border town, where they were protected by corrupt police officers. This organization controlled a portion of the South's psychotropic substance trafficking. Alan's father was eventually linked to his son's crimes and was forced to cooperate with the authorities, giving a statement that incriminated him. He was initially sentenced to 20 years in prison but was unexpectedly released from prison on July 18, 2000, after being enrolled in a witness protection program. Alan was always surrounded by women, but he had been in love with a classmate since childhood, whom he eventually married. The marriage was brief but happy, and they had a beautiful daughter. However, Alan's frequent absence from home due to work led to their divorce. He found it extremely difficult to part with she he had loved since high school. Subsequent relationships brought him no joy, and the loneliness and sadness led him to gradually develop a drinking problem. Alan struggled with chronic depression and developed an alcohol addiction, which led to a destructive habit. To overcome this, he tried various methods, including reading books, attending Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, and seeking professional help. He eventually found Dr. Alberto, a renowned psychiatrist. Unknown to Alan, his therapist, Dr. Alberto, was also preparing his ex-wife for psychotherapy. However, Dr. Alberto informed his ex-wife that he could not treat her for ethical reasons, since he was already treating Alan psychologically. Instead, he referred her to another psychiatrist, Maria Alejandra. Alberto did not disclose his personal relationship with Maria Alejandra to his ex-wife because this could create a conflict of interest in the therapeutic relationship. Alejandra soon discovered that Alan could be the perfect match for her. He was described as a kind and wealthy man in his prime. Without hesitation, Alejandra asked her client to bring her ex-husband in for another therapy session, claiming she could resolve their issues in one visit and help them break their strong emotional bond. As soon as the session began, Alejandra and Alan started working on a plan to seduce each other. After the session, Alan invited Alejandra out for coffee to discuss his family problems. Although Alejandra initially declined the invitation, citing professional ethics, they ended up going on a date that same evening. An affair quickly developed between them. Alan's ex-wife was shocked to discover what had happened. She considered reporting the incident to the doctor's ethics committee, but ultimately decided against it. Alejandra, a competent specialist, convinced her that pursuing the matter was motivated by jealousy and an inability to let go of the past. The doctor believed that holding on to these feelings would hinder her chances of a happy future. Ultimately, Alan's ex-wife chose not to report the affair. Meanwhile, her sessions with the doctor came to an end. Alan and Alejandra's relationship progressed quickly. Within a few months of their first date, they decided to move in together. 2 months later, they decided to get married. However, Alan was unaware of the secrets that Alejandra was hiding, including the reason behind her divorce from her ex-husband. In April 2014, Alan traveled to visit his parents for the weekend, which turned out to be the perfect opportunity to discuss his upcoming wedding with them. However, Alan's parents were shocked to learn about his fiancée, Alejandra, as they had never heard of her before. A week after Alan's conversation with his parents, they registered their marriage. Notably, Alejandra asked Alan not to invite her friends and relatives to the wedding, citing a modest celebration and a limited budget. Although the wedding was supposed to be low-key, it was later revealed that Alejandra's father did attend the ceremony. The young family's life initially seemed like a fairy tale, filled with happiness and endless plans for the future. However, this perfect appearance did not last long. Alejandra's hysterical nature and the horrors of this story began to emerge. Although no one expected it at the time, the relationship between the newlyweds began to deteriorate rapidly. Alan was a secretive person who kept his personal life private, sharing few details with friends. As a result, little was known about what was happening behind closed doors. Nonetheless, it was clear that the relationship was no longer the same. The once happy couple now appeared troubled. After meeting Alejandra, Alan became increasingly estranged from his family. The final straw was when he got married without inviting his parents. The rift became so deep that they eventually stopped communicating altogether. Alan's friends began to notice that his wife, Alejandra, was becoming increasingly nervous and irritable. She would lose her temper quickly and behave erratically. After a few incidents, Alan felt ashamed and decided to limit their social interactions. However, the problems at home only worsened, with quarrels occurring daily over trivial matters. One evening, Alejandra went through Alan's cell phone and discovered sexually explicit messages with other women. This revelation was the final straw for her. She claimed that Alan had been physically and mentally abusive, and she could no longer tolerate his infidelity. Instead of seeking counseling or trying to salvage the relationship, Alejandra decided to take a different approach. She chose to focus on planning the perfect murder, using a method she was familiar with. Her attention was now fixed on creating a plan to eliminate Alan. Meanwhile, Alan continues his daily routine, unaware of the shocking events that are about to unfold. Despite limited contact with his family, he attends his grandfather's birthday party. However, the presence of his wife, Alejandra, causes tension, as his parents have made it clear that she is not welcome in their home. This further strains their relationship. It would later become clear that this was the last time the family saw Alan alive. On October 31, 2014, Alan sent a text message to his family, assuring them he had arrived home safely after the party. But after that, all contact ceased. He failed to show up at work for several days, which was unusual for the diligent entrepreneur. His absence was alarming, especially with the launch of a new project imminent, requiring his presence. Alejandra hatched a terrible plan. Alejandra's decision was to kill her husband immediately. Alejandra came up with a plan to kill her husband. She added a strong sleeping pill to the milk he drank before going to bed, then covered him with a pillow. When he passed out, she was faced with the challenge of disposing of his body, something she had no time to plan. Since Alan was too heavy for her to move, Alejandra ran to the neighbor's garden and retrieved an electric saw. With a grim expression, Alejandra dismembered her husband's body into pieces, then packed the remains into garbage bags. To hinder identification, she cut off his fingers and pulled out his teeth. Alejandra stuffed the bags into suitcases, hoping to smuggle the bodies out without raising suspicion. However, her plans were foiled when an elderly neighbor, who suffered from insomnia, watched her from her window as she attempted to leave her home with the suitcases in the early hours of the morning. The neighbor became concerned about Alejandra's early departure and her unusual behavior, as she kept looking around nervously. Little did the neighbor know, Alejandra had scattered the bags containing her ex-husband's remains in various neighborhoods to cover her tracks. Alejandra then returned home, further raising the neighbor's suspicions. As the day began, Alejandra continued her normal routine, hiding her dark secret. Alejandra's father attempted to use his connections and bribes to prevent his daughter's imprisonment, but he was unsuccessful. However, Alberto did manage to keep the trial private to avoid drawing more attention to the case. His motivations were largely self-serving, as Alberto was concerned about the impact the trial would have on his own career. As a specialist, Alberto feared that his reputation would be tarnished by his inability to diagnose and address his own daughter's problems. The trial also brought up the case of Alejandra's first husband's death, but as time passed, the evidence was no longer available. There was also suspicion that Alejandra's father was involved in her crimes. However, these claims were never proven. After multiple appeals from the victims' families, Alejandra's sentence was commuted to death, a rare and unprecedented outcome in Mexico. This sentence is particularly unusual in that it does not allow for a review of the case. As part of the sentence, Alejandra's property will be transferred to the victim's family, although this can provide little comfort in the face of their loss.